I paid 300,000 for my daughter's fairy tale wedding in Paris. And I did it with a smile. I booked the chateau. I paid for the vintage wine. I even paid for the first-class tickets for her and her fiancé Luca. I was sitting at my desk with a glass of cheap bourbon, celebrating the final transfer when my computer pinged. It was an email from my daughter Cassandra. The subject line read, "Important wedding update." I opened it, expecting a thank you note or maybe a photo of the flower arrangements. Instead, I read the words that killed the father inside me. The email said, "Dad, please do not come to Paris. Luca and I have discussed this, and your presence will be a problem. You do not speak French, and quite frankly, your blue-collar mannerisms will embarrass me in front of the Moreau family. They are nobility. Dad, they are sophisticated. You are a truck driver. We will tell everyone you are sick. I canceled your plane ticket. Please just send the rest of the money for the catering. We love you, Cassandra." I stared at that screen for a long moment. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just took another pull from my glass of cheap bourbon and felt a coldness sink into my chest, heavier than any engine block I'd ever hauled across a state line. My eyes drifted down to the transfer confirmation, still sitting open in the browser. $150 pending. My finger hovered over the mouse. I didn't hesitate. I clicked cancel transaction. Then I grabbed my phone and called the fraud department at my bank and told them to lock down the black card I'd handed my daughter. The next morning, I came to with 36 missed calls and a voicemail that could have shattered glass. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened when I pulled the floor out from under their little fantasy. The quiet in my house that night pressed down like something physical. It was the kind of silence that follows a funeral, and in a way I think that's exactly what it was. I was grieving the little girl I used to lift up onto my shoulders. I settled into my worn corduroy armchair, its fabric rubbed thin, just like the skin on my knuckles, and fixed my eyes on the digital clock on the cable box. Midnight. Welcome back to Honor Revenge Stories, a place where real pain, real patience, and real justice find their voice. If this is your first time here, I'm glad you found us. Stay close because every story we share is the kind that stays with you long after it ends. Drop a follow so you don't miss what's coming. And before we go any further, where are you listening from today and what time is it there? With a story about family and betrayal, I'd love to know who's sitting with me right now. A quick note, some elements of this story have been fictionalized for dramatic storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to specific real individuals or events is purely coincidental. It's the truth at the heart of it that matters most. That email was still glowing on my laptop screen. The monitor light was the only thing cutting through the dark, throwing long shadows across the walls. I had paid for the roof I had kept over her head, the life I had scraped together from nothing. I read that line one more time. "You are a truck driver." She wrote it with contempt, like it was something to be ashamed of, like every million miles I had ground out on the interstate miles that paid for her private schools. Her equestrian lessons or art degrees had never counted for a thing. She was right about one thing. I am a truck driver. I started with a single rig 30 years ago. I slept in the cab. I ate out of cans. I showered at truck stops. I held on to every dime while my friends spent freely on new cars. Today I run the biggest logistics fleet on the East Coast. My net worth sits north of 50 million, but Cassandra does not know that. She knows I own trucks. She knows I have money, but in her mind, I am just a manager who got fortunate with a handful of contracts. She thinks I live in this modest 3-bedroom house in Connecticut because it is the best I can manage. She does not know I own the block. She does not know I hold the deed to the building her fiancé lives in. She does not know that the only reason she glides through life wrapped in luxury is because I am the one holding all the strings. And she wanted to cut those strings. No, she wanted to keep the strings fastened to my wallet and sever the ones fastened to me. She wanted the fruit, but she wanted to tear down the tree because the bark was too rough against her soft hands. I looked back at the transfer screen. Status canceled. 2 beautiful words. It was the first time in 28 years I had told her no. When she was 5 and wanted a pony, I bought her lessons. When she was 16 and wanted a BMW, I bought her a sensible sedan, and she cried until I gave in and upgraded it. When she was 22 and wanted to spend a year finding herself in Italy, I covered the rent. I had built this creature myself. I knew that. I sat there working through my bourbon and accepting my portion of the blame. But accepting blame is not the same as accepting defeat. I picked up my phone again. It was 1 Newark in the morning here, which put it at 7 in the morning in Paris. Or maybe they were still in New York. It did not much matter to me. I dialed the credit card concierge line. The operator picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Drummond, how can we assist you this evening?" I kept my voice flat and even. "I want to report a compromise on the supplementary card ending in 4598. That is the card issued to Cassandra Drummond." The operator asked whether the card had been stolen. I said, "No, it has not been stolen. It is being used by an unauthorized person. That person is no longer authorized to spend my money. Please flag it as lost or stolen and decline all charges immediately." "Effective now." The operator confirmed. "Card blocked." I hung up. I finished my drink. I rinsed the glass at the sink. I switched off the lights. I made my way upstairs to the bedroom, knees popping on every step, years of dropping out of cabs and hauling cargo, doing their work on my joints. Years of that hard labor, so she would never have to know what it felt like. I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling. I expected guilt to roll in. A father ought to feel guilty for cutting off his own child, right? But guilt never came. What settled over me instead was a strange clean clarity, like pushing through miles of thick fog and suddenly breaking into open sky on the other side. I could see the road stretching ahead, and it was going to be rough going for Cassandra. I slept soundly, up at 6, same as always. Pure habit. You do not put in 40 years behind a wheel without your body hardwiring itself to rise with the sun. I went to the kitchen and got the coffee going. The smell of cheap drip coffee spread through the room. Cassandra always had something to say about my coffee. She thought I ought to buy an espresso machine. She thought I should be ordering beans from Ethiopia. I like mine black and strong and cheap, and I have never seen a reason to change that. I poured a mug and carried it to the living room. I picked up my phone. The screen came alive. 36 missed calls, 50 text messages, 14 voicemails. Notifications cascading down the display like water off a ledge. Every single one from Cassandra. I left the voicemails alone for the moment. I just worked through the texts. The early ones were confused. "Dad, the card isn't working. Dad. Are you awake? Dad. Call the bank." Then they turned angry. "Dad, pick up the phone. Dad, I am at the register. This is embarrassing. Dad, what the hell is going on?" And the final batch was pure venom. "You are doing this on purpose. I hate you. You are ruining everything." I lifted the mug and took a sip. It tasted outstanding this morning. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was her. I swiped green. Pressed it to my ear without saying a word. I just listened. "You old lunatic." She was screaming so loud the microphone was distorting and clipping. Behind her voice I could make out background noise, other people talking classical music drifting through. She was in a store that played classical music. "Cassandra," I said, the same voice I use when I have to let a driver go for drinking on the job. Steady, final. "Don't you Cassandra me," she shrieked. "I am standing in the middle of Dior. Do you hear me, Dior? I have the wedding dress on, the one we picked out together, the one that cost $20,000. And the card was declined. The woman at the counter just cut it in half. Dad, she cut it in half. She said it was reported stolen. Every person in this store is staring at me right now. They think I am a thief. Fix this? Fix this right now?" I took another slow sip of coffee. I pictured her in there, ringed by mirrors, surrounded by silk and satin face burning red. Her fiancé, Luca, probably studying a scarf somewhere nearby, working very hard to look uninvolved. "I thought you were the one worried about embarrassment, Cassandra," I said. "What are you talking about?" "Fix the card, transfer the money. You sent me an email last night." I said, "You told me my presence would embarrass you. You said I was too uncultured. You said I'm just a truck driver." There was a pause, a short one. Then she huffed. "This is about the email. Dad, stop being petty. We can work through that later. Right now I have a sales associate looking at me like I am trash. Pay for the dress." "No," I said. "What did you say?" I said no. If I am too embarrassing to show up at the wedding, then a truck driver's money is too embarrassing to pay for the dress. That kind of money is dirty, Cassandra. It is soaked in grease and diesel. It would leave a stain on that white silk. I am doing you a favor. I am sparing you the humiliation of being bankrolled by a blue-collar man. Dad, stop it. You are being ridiculous. Luca is right here. His mother arrives tomorrow. We have the fitting. You gave your word. You promised to pay for the wedding. I promised to pay for my daughter's wedding," I said. "But it appears I do not have a daughter. What I have is a critic, a judge. And since I have been barred from attending, I will assume I am barred from the bills as well." She started up again. "Something about contracts. Something about what she was owed. Something about how I was wrecking her big day. I ended the call. No slamming. Just a press of the red button, the kitchen went quiet again. It felt almost peaceful. But I knew that would not hold. Cassandra was in New York. New York is a 90-minute drive from my place in Connecticut. If she was standing in Dior on Fifth Avenue, she would be in a car pointed toward me within minutes. Luca would be driving, that Porsche I was carrying the lease on. They would be coming for blood. I pushed up from my chair and walked to the window. I looked out at the front lawn. I cut that grass myself. I fixed that fence myself. A modest house. A good house. The house where she grew up, where I pressed Band-Aids onto her scraped knees. Where I sat beside her and worked through her homework. And now she looked at this house and saw a shack. She looked at me and saw a wallet. I crossed to the closet and opened the safe. I spun the dial. Click, click, click. The heavy metal door swung open. I reached in and pulled out a file folder, a thick one. Inside was the research my lawyer Chet had handed me a week ago. I hadn't wanted to believe it at the time. I'd thrown the thing in the safe and tried to put it out of my mind. Chet had told me, "Walt, you need to read this before you sign the checks." I told him to stay in his lane. I told him Cassandra was in love. I told him the Moreau family was legitimate. Chet was a good lawyer. He was also my closest friend. We hauled trucks together in the 80s. He put himself through night school. I bought more trucks. We both clawed our way out of the dirt, but Chet never lost his nose for a rat. And he smelled one in Luca. I opened the folder. I studied the photos. I went through the bank statements Chet had dug up. I looked at the truth about the chateau in Bordeaux. I looked at the truth about Luca's so-called career. I looked at the truth about the Moreau family's noble lineage. Then I closed the folder. I set it on the kitchen table. I sat down and waited. It took them 2 hours. I heard the engine first, the aggressive revving of a sports car engine working too hard to sound like something. I glanced out the window. The silver Porsche swung into my driveway. It scraped the undercarriage on the incline because it sat too low to the ground. Good. Luca climbed out first. He had on a suit that probably cost more than my first truck, driving moccasins with no socks. He looked at my house with a sneer on his face. He said something to Cassandra. I couldn't catch the words, but his body said everything. He was disgusted. Cassandra got out behind him. She still had her makeup on, but it was smeared. She'd been crying. Not grief rage. She came up the walkway at a march. She didn't knock. She still had a key. I made a mental note to change the locks. The door flew open. They blew into my living room like they were executing a search warrant. "How dare you!" Cassandra screamed. She flung her purse onto my couch, my leather couch, the one she said smelled like old man. "You stranded us!" she yelled. The card was declined at lunch too. We had to use Luca's emergency cash. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? Luca stood behind her with his arms folded. He scanned my living room like he was worried he might catch something from the upholstery. "Mr. Drummond," he said. His accent was thick, or at least he performed it that way. I'd heard him speak flawless English once when he thought I wasn't in earshot, but around me, he leaned into the French aristocrat routine. "Mr. Drummond, this behavior is unacceptable. In my culture, we honor family agreements. You agreed to pay. You cannot simply pull your support over a single email. It is childish." I looked at him. I looked at his $3,000 suit. I looked at his manicured hands. Hands that had never changed a tire. Hands that had never gripped a wrench. "Sit down," I said. "I will not sit down," Cassandra shouted. "I want you to unfreeze the card right now, and I want you to wire the catering money, and I want an apology, a big one. You ruined my fitting." I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold. "Sit down," I said again. My voice wasn't raised, but it carried a diesel rumble underneath it. It was the voice that used to make union leaders straighten up in their seats. Cassandra stopped. She looked at me. She saw something she didn't recognize. She saw the CEO, not the dad. She perched on the edge of the armchair. Luca stayed on his feet. He tapped his foot against the floor. "You sent me an email," I said. "You banned me from your wedding." "It is not a ban," Luca said. He gave a dismissive wave of his hand. "It is a strategic decision. The wedding is a high society event. My family, the Moreaus. We have a reputation to protect. We have senators coming. We have dukes coming. Cassandra loves you. But let us be honest, Mr. Drummond. You are a simple man. You tell loud jokes. You drink beer from the bottle. You do not speak a word of French. You would be uncomfortable. We are doing this for you." "For me," I said. "Yes," Cassandra said. She leaned toward me. "Dad, You know you hate these kinds of things. You hate dressing up, you hate fancy food. You'd be miserable the whole time. We're letting you off the hook. You can stay here. You can watch the live stream. We'll set up a dedicated camera just for you. You can have your beer and your worn corduroy armchair and be perfectly happy, and we can have our perfect day without worrying about you saying something to the Count of Monte Cristo or whoever. I looked at her, my daughter. I thought about teaching her to ride a bike in this very driveway. I remembered her crying when she scraped her knee. I remembered telling her she was a princess. So I'm an embarrassment, I said. You're just different, she said. You're blue-collar dad, and that's fine here, fine for Connecticut. But this is Paris. This is the Moros. They trace their bloodline back to kings. You trace yours back to a coal mine in West Virginia. It's just oil and water. I looked over at Luca. He was smirking, a small, arrogant smirk. He thought he'd won. He thought I was a dim old man with a checkbook and a chip on my shoulder. I glanced at the folder sitting on the table, the folder holding the truth about his bloodline. Okay, I said. Okay what? Cassandra asked. Okay, I understand, I said. I leaned back in my chair. I rubbed my face with both hands. I let my shoulders drop. I made myself look smaller, older, beaten. You're right, I said. I'm just a trucker. I don't belong in a castle. I don't want to ruin your big day. Cassandra exhaled. She smiled. It was the smile of a predator watching the prey go limp. Exactly, Dad. I knew you'd come around. It's for the best. So, you'll fix the card? Luca asked. I looked at him. I looked at his shoes. I need a couple of days, I said. A couple of days, Cassandra snapped. We don't have a couple of days. We fly out for Paris on Friday. I need to move some money around. I lied. I canceled the transfers. Reversing it takes time. The bank flagged the account for fraud because I acted out of anger. I have to go in person. I have to sign paperwork. It's a whole process. How long? Luca demanded. 2 days. Give me 2 days, I said. I'll sort the money out. I'll cover the catering. I'll cover the dress. And you'll stay here. Cassandra asked. I'll stay here, I said. I won't come to Paris. I won't embarrass you. Luca clapped his hands together. Good. This is sensible. This is the right decision, Mr. Drummond. You are showing wisdom. Cassandra stood up. She grabbed her purse. Okay, 2 days, but I need cash right now, Dad. The card's dead. I have appointments. I need cash. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my money clip. I had around $200 in 20s. I tossed it onto the table. That's all I've got on me, I said. She stared at the pile of bills like it was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. $200. That won't even cover lunch. It's what I have, I said, until I get to the bank. She snatched the money up. Fine, whatever. Just fix the transfer. We have the final walkthrough with the wedding planner Thursday. If the funds aren't there, they'll pull the venue. I know, I said. I'll handle it. She headed for the door. She didn't hug me. She didn't say thank you. She just walked out. Luca trailed after her. He paused at the door. He turned and looked at me. You are doing the right thing, he said. It's stick to what you know. Let us handle the world. Then he walked out. I heard the Porsche fire up. I heard them pull away. I sat in the silence. I looked at the empty spot where my daughter had been standing. I looked at the $200 she'd taken with her. Stick to what you know, he'd said. I smiled. Not a kind smile. A wolf's smile. I know logistics, Luca, I said to the empty room. I know how to move things from point A to point B, and I know how to shut down a supply line. I picked the folder up off the table. I opened it. I looked at the name of the bank in Paris where Luca claimed his family trust was held. I looked at the name of the real estate holding company that supposedly owned the chateau. I picked up my phone. I called Chet. Chet, I said. Yeah, Walt. He picked up. He sounded like he was eating a sandwich. You were right, I said. I know I was right about which part, about all of it. They just left. They told me I'm too blue-collar for Paris, told me to stay home and mail the check. I heard Chet stop chewing. That little witch. What did you do? I told them I'd fix it, told them to give me 2 days. Why, Walt? Why hand them 2 days? Pull the plug now. No, I said. If I cut them off today, they just hate me and walk away. They find their next victim. They tell everyone I abandoned them. I want to finish this the right way. What are you planning, Walt? I want you to book the jet. The jet? You just said you weren't going. I lied, I said. I'm going to Paris, Chet, but not as the father of the bride. Then who are you going as? I'm going as the man who owns the bank, I said. Chet laughed, a deep rolling belly laugh. Oh, this is going to be something. When do we leave? Tonight, I said. Pack your best suit. There's a dinner reservation we need to crash. I put the phone down. I got to my feet. I walked to the window and stood there looking out at the street. My daughter wanted a lesson in class. She wanted to talk about lineage and nobility and what a man is worth. Fine. I was going to give her a lesson. I was going to show her that you don't judge a book by its cover, especially when that book owns the whole library. I went upstairs to pack. No tuxedo. I packed my work boots. I packed my jeans. And I packed the single most dangerous thing I owned, my black Amex in a folder thick with receipts. They wanted the truck driver. They were going to get the truck driver, but they forgot that a truck driver knows exactly how to run you over. I pulled my truck into the lot at Rudy's Diner about 20 minutes after Cassandra and Luca had peeled out in their leased Porsche. This was not the kind of place where French nobility came to dine. It was the kind of place where you found cheap drip coffee that tasted like battery acid and men who had actually built this country with their hands. The neon sign buzzed and flickered like it was on its last breath, and the air carried the scent of bacon grease and diesel fumes. To me, that smelled like home. To my daughter, it would probably smell like failure. I pushed through the door, and Darlene the waitress gave me a nod without breaking her pour. No question about what I wanted. She just tipped her head toward the corner booth. Chet was already there. If you looked at Chet Rafferty, you'd see a man in a faded denim shirt with a grease stain on the cuff and knuckles that suggested they'd been rearranged at least once. You'd figure him for someone who rebuilt carburetors for a living. You would be dead wrong. Chet was the sharpest corporate attorney on the Eastern Seaboard. He'd graduated at the top of his class from Yale Law, but he had no use for suits, no use for boardrooms either. He preferred to conduct business right here, working through a club sandwich and an iced tea while he dismantled hedge fund managers over the phone. He glanced up as I dropped into the booth across from him. The vinyl let out a squeak under my weight. "You look like you just got flattened by your own fleet," Chet said. No hello, straight to the point. That was exactly why I liked him. "Feel like it too," I said. "Nice," he said. I caught Darlene's eye and signaled for a coffee. Chet slid a manila folder across the sticky table toward me. It dragged over a patch of dried syrup. "Good news first," he said, biting into a fry. "The acquisition of the Midwest distribution hubs is done. I spent the morning twisting the arm of the seller's legal team. They folded. You now control the shipping lanes from Ohio to Nebraska." I picked up the folder with a nod. Didn't open it. I already knew what was inside. "What's the valuation, Chet?" I asked. He dabbed his mouth with a paper napkin. "Factor in the new assets and the government contracts we locked up last month. Your fleet is officially valued at $52 million. Liquid assets in the holding company are sitting around $8 million. Personally, you're carrying a net worth that puts you in the top 1% of this state. Congratulations, you old blue-collar bum." $52 million. I said the number under my breath. Just a number. It meant I'd won the game. I'd started with a beat-up Chevy Malibu and a plan, and now I was running an empire. But sitting there with my daughter's voice still ringing in my ears, $52 million felt like loose change. It could buy a fleet of trucks. It couldn't buy her respect. "She doesn't know, does she?" Chet said. He read my face the way only someone who's known you for decades can. He knew me better than anyone alive. We dug ditches side by side before he went to law school, and I bought my first rig. "No," I said. "She thinks I'm a dispatcher. She thinks I manage the fleet, not own it. She thinks the house in Connecticut is everything I've got." "And you keep it that way, why?" Chet asked, pointing a fry at me. "Because you want her to stay humble. How's that working out?" I took a sip of the coffee Darlene had set down. It was scorching. "It is not working out, Chet. She just banned me from her wedding." Chet stopped mid-chew. He set the fry back on his plate. He looked at me, eyes going narrow. The lawyer surfaced, the shark that made CEOs sweat at the breakfast table. "Say that again," he said. His voice dropped a register. "She banned me. I laid out the whole thing. The email, the black card, the visit to the house. I told him how Luca had stood in my living room in a suit I'd bankrolled and explained that I was too simple to mingle with his people. I told him how Cassandra said I was just a truck driver, that oil and water don't mix." Chet listened without a word. He just sat there, his face going harder with every sentence. His jaw clenched, the muscles ticking beneath the skin. So let me get this straight," Chet said, slow and deliberate. "You just dropped 300 grand on a party you're not invited to, and you're letting them treat you like the hired help." I leaned in. The table shook a little. "I am not letting them do anything, Chet. I told them I'd fix it, told them the money would come in 2 days. You lied, Chet said. A grin crept across his face. Wicked, dangerous. I lied, I confirmed. I'm not sending them a cent. I'm going to Paris, Chet, and you're coming with me. Chet laughed. It was a sharp bark that made a couple of truckers at the counter swivel around on their stools. I knew it, he said. I knew you weren't going to just lie down and take that. So, what's the play? We fly over, wave the bank statements in their faces, and watch them grovel. That's too easy. If I just flash the money, they'll apologize, sure. But it'll be hollow. They'll love the $50 million, not the father. I don't want their fake apologies, Chet. I want to burn the whole fantasy to the ground. I want to expose them. I tapped the folder Chet had given me, the one on the business deal. You uncovered the logistics of the Midwest acquisition in 3 days, I said. You found the skeletons in the closet of a company that had been spotless for 20 years. Chet shrugged. I'm good at my job. I need you to be better, I said. I need you to dig into the Moreau family. Luca claims they are nobility, claims they own a chateau in Bordeaux, claims they're old money. Chet snorted. Old money doesn't lease a Porsche Walt. Old money drives a 10-year-old Volvo and wears sweaters with holes in the elbows. New money makes noise. Real wealth stays quiet. Luca is making a hell of a lot of noise. Exactly, I said. My gut says he's a fraud. He talks about lineage too much, drops names constantly. And Cassandra is so swept up in the idea of being a princess that she's not bothering to check the facts. I want a full dossier, Chet. I want to know where they bank. I want to know who holds the deed to that chateau. I want to know whether Luca has ever held an honest job in his life. I want to know what color underwear they wear. I want everything. Chet reached into his denim pocket and pulled out a small notebook. He clicked a cheap plastic pen. I can have the preliminaries to you by tomorrow morning, he said. I've got a contact in Zurich and another one in Lyon. If these people are carrying debt, I'll find it. If there's a criminal record, I'll find it. If they're frauds, I'll peel them like an onion. Good, I said. And Walt, Chet said, looking up from his notes. What about the wedding? The contracts. I smiled. It was the same smile I'd used when I negotiated the union strikes in '98. You're the lawyer, Chet. You tell me. I signed the contract for the venue. My name is on the deposit for the catering. Legally, who owns that wedding? Chet's grin spread wide. You do. You are the client of record. So, if I decide to change the guest list, I said, or if I decide to change the menu, or if I decide to turn the reception into a corporate retreat for my top drivers, that is my right. It's your party, Walt, Chet said. You can cry if you want to, or you can make them cry. I finished my coffee. I laid a $20 on the table. Get me that information, Chet. We fly out tomorrow night. I want to walk into that rehearsal dinner with everything I need. Chet tucked the notebook away. He got up and clapped me on the shoulder. His grip was solid. They picked the wrong truck driver to mess with Walt. We headed out of the diner into the cool night air. The parking lot was a sea of 18-wheelers' engines idling in a low, steady chorus of power. These were my people. This was my world. Honest work, honest sweat. Cassandra wanted a fairy tale. She wanted a castle. She wanted a prince. I climbed into my pickup. I watched Chet get into his beat-up Chevy Malibu. Two men worth millions, walking out of a diner that smelled like grease. She was going to get her fairy tale, but she'd forgotten that in the original stories, the wolves eat the children who wander off the path. And I was done playing the woodcutter, who rides to the rescue. It was time to let the wolf out. It was 3:00 in the morning when Chet came back to my house. I hadn't slept. I was at the kitchen table with the same empty coffee mug from earlier that day and a bottle of antacids. The house had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like pressure building inside a boiler. I heard Chet's Malibu roll into the driveway. The car door shut hard. He didn't knock. He just walked in. He looked worn out. His eyes were red and his tie was hanging loose. He was carrying a cardboard banker's box, not a folder, a whole box. He set it down on the table. The sound it made was heavy, like a judge's gavel coming down, like a cell door closing. I looked at the box and then I looked at Chet. Is it bad? I asked. Chet crossed to the fridge. He pulled out a beer. He cracked it open and took a long pull. He wiped his mouth on the back of his hand. Walt, he said, it is not bad. Bad implies there's some good mixed in somewhere. Bad implies a mistake was made. This is not a mistake. This is a catastrophe. This is a 5-alarm fire in a dynamite factory. He sat down across from me. He tapped the lid of the box. I woke up my contact in Lyon. He made me pay double because it was a rush job. Then I called a guy I know who used to work fraud investigations for Interpol. He owes me one from back when I got his nephew out of a DUI in Connecticut. Between the two of them, we pulled the entire digital life of the Moreau family. He opened the box. It was stuffed with paper bank statements, property deeds, court documents, police reports. "Where do you want to start?" Chet asked. "The fake castle, the fake job, or the fake parents?" "Start with the castle," I said. "That's the centerpiece of the whole thing. Cassandra hasn't stopped talking about the ancestral home for 6 months. She's shown me pictures. It has turrets. It has a vineyard." Chet pulled out a thick clipped stack of papers and slid them across to me. "Here's the deed," he said. "Or rather, the absence of one. The Château de Sainte-Hélène does not belong to the Moreau family. It never has. It's owned by a hospitality holding company based out of Dubai. It's a wedding venue, Walt a rental. You could book it on Expedia if you had enough points." I stared at the paper. It was a commercial lease agreement. "Luca told Cassandra it's been in his family since the 1700s, I said. "He told her the wine we'd be drinking at the reception comes from his grandfather's vines." "Luca is a liar," Chet said. "The only thing his grandfather left him was a genetic predisposition for it. The Moreaus rent that place for 2 weeks every year to keep up the appearance. They take photos, they throw a party, they play Lord and Lady of the Manor, then they stuff their fake Louis Vuitton bags and go back to their actual lives." "And what does that actual life look like?" I asked. Chet pulled out another stack. This one was thicker, red stamps all over it. "Bankruptcy," he said. "Armand and Isabelle Moreau filed for insolvency in 2018. They ran a chain of dry cleaning businesses in Marseille that were really fronts for money laundering. The French government came in and seized everything: their apartment in Paris, their cars, their accounts. They are flat broke, Walt. They're living off credit cards opened in other people's names. They're bouncing checks across 3 different countries." I felt a cold knot pull tight in my stomach. My daughter was marrying into a crime scene. "And Luca?" I asked. "What does the prince actually do?" Chet laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Luca is a consultant. That's what he tells people. Do you know what he consults on?" I shook my head. "He consults the roulette wheel," Chet said. "He's a gambler, Walt, and not a talented one. He's been banned from 2 casinos in Monaco and 1 in Macau. He owes $180,000 to a private lender in Nice. These are not people you want carrying a balance with. These are the kind who charge interest in broken bones." Chet slid a photograph across the table. It was a surveillance shot, grainy black and white. It showed Luca in a heated argument with a man in a leather jacket outside a club. Luca looked scared out of his mind. I picked up the photo. My hand was trembling, not from fear, from rage. "So," I said, "the wedding, the $300,000. Chet nodded slowly. He took another sip of beer. "You're a smart man, Walt. You understand logistics. You understand how to follow the money. Ask yourself, why were they so insistent on you wiring the funds directly to their account in France instead of paying the vendors yourself? Why did they panic when you pulled the transfer? Because they're not paying the vendors," I said. The truth of it landed like a punch to the chest. "Exactly," Chet said. "They need your 300 grand to pay off the loan shark in Nice. They need it to keep Armand out of jail for tax evasion. They need it to keep the lights on in whatever rental they're squatting in. The wedding isn't a celebration, Walt. It's a heist. They are robbing you blind, and they're using Cassandra as the getaway driver." I stood up. I walked to the window. The sun was starting to push up over the horizon. The sky had turned a bruised shade of purple. I stared out at my quiet street. I thought about Cassandra. I thought about her arrogance the day before. I thought about the way she'd looked at my furniture with contempt. "She is so blind," I whispered. "She thinks she's marrying a prince. She thinks she's lifting herself up. She thinks she's leaving the truck driver's world behind and stepping into the aristocracy. But she's just a mark. She's a victim with a wealthy father." Chet came to stand beside me at the window. "She's a hostage, Walt. That's what she is. But she's a hostage who fell in love with the people holding her. She's pointing the gun at her own head." "Does she know?" I asked. "Does she have any idea about any of this?" Chet shrugged. "I doubt it. Luca is charming. He's a con artist, that's his profession. He probably showed her the fake deed. He probably walked her through that rental castle and told her stories about his ancestors. She wants to believe it, Walt. That's the real problem. She resents her background so deeply, resents where she came from so badly that She'll swallow any fairy tale that promises to erase it. She's dazzled by the shine. She can't see the rot underneath. I turned back to the table. I looked at the box of evidence. It was a coffin, the coffin of my daughter's future. If I let her walk down that aisle, she would be destroyed. They would drain her dry. They would leverage her credit. They would use her as a lever to get to me, and when the money was gone, they'd throw her away like a blown tire. I have to tell her, I said. I reached for my phone. I have to call her. I have to show her all of this. Chet put his hand on my arm. He held me back. Think about that, Walt. Think about everything that's happened in the last 24 hours. She despises you right now. In her mind, you're a jealous, petty old man trying to wreck her happiness out of bitterness. If you pick up that phone and tell her that her prince is flat broke, she won't believe a word of it. She'll decide you made the whole thing up. She'll say you're trying to sabotage her. She'll run straight to him, and he'll weave a story about how you've been lying. He'll claim you paid people to forge the paperwork. He'll poison her against you for good. I looked over at Chet. He was right. He was always right. That was exactly why I kept him on that fat retainer. So what's the play here? I asked. Do I just stand aside and let her marry this man? Do I sit back while she torches her own life? No, Chet said. We go to Paris. We stick to the plan. You don't tell her. You show her. You show all of them. You wait until they're gathered in one room. You wait until the lies have piled so high they're ready to collapse, and then you knock out the foundation. I turned back to the box. I lifted out a bank statement belonging to Armand Moreau. It showed a balance of $14,000, charges from liquor stores and online gambling sites, line after line. These people called me simple, I said. My voice barely cleared a whisper. They called me uncultured. They stood in my own living room and told me I wasn't fit to sit at their table. They're projecting, Walt Chet said. They're pushing their own failure onto you. They resent you because you're real. You've got real money, real success, real calluses on your hands. They're ghosts. They're smoke. And they are terrified you'll come along and blow them away. I settled back in my seat. I pulled the box closer. I started reading. Every page. I went through the foreclosure notices on the dry cleaning business. I read the police report from when Luca was arrested for writing bad checks in 2014. I read the emails Isabel had sent to her creditors begging for more time. With each page, I turned the sadness in my chest, hardened into something else. Something cold. Something final. Cassandra was my daughter. I loved her more than anything, but she had made herself a fool. She'd let her vanity leave her exposed. Her shame of me had blinded her to what was standing right in front of her face. A warning wasn't going to save her. A warning would be too easy to dismiss. She needed a shock. She needed to see the monster with the mask ripped off. I closed the box. Full daylight was pouring through the windows now. Birds going outside. It was shaping up to be a gorgeous day in Connecticut. "Pack your bags, Chet," I said. Chet smiled. He drained the rest of his beer. "The jet's fueled up and ready at Oxford Airport," he said. "We can touch down in Paris by tomorrow morning." I got to my feet. I felt strong. I felt the way I used to feel in the cab of my first truck pushing a double load through a blizzard. I knew the road ahead was treacherous. I knew the ice was slick under the wheels, but I had the horsepower to punch through. "I'm not going to pay for the wedding," I said. "No," Chet said, "but you are going to pay for the lesson." I said, "And it's going to be the most expensive lesson they've ever sat through." I walked back to my bedroom. I opened the closet. I pushed aside the few suits hanging there. I reached all the way to the back and pulled out my old canvas work jacket, the one I wore when I was first building the company. It was beat up. It smelled of diesel. Cassandra hated that jacket. She always said it made me look like a thug. I put it on. It fit like it was made for me. I stood in front of the mirror. I didn't see a CEO staring back. I didn't see a millionaire. I saw Walt Drummond, truck driver father, and the man who was about to bring the hammer down. "We're going to Paris, Chet," I said, "and we're going to introduce the Moreau family to the concept of foreclosure." Chet grabbed the box. "I'll drive," he said. We walked out to the truck. I didn't look back at the house. The house was the past. Paris was the future, and I was bringing the storm with me. The drive to the airport was quiet. I thought about Luca's smirk. I thought about the way his eyes dropped to my shoes. I thought about how he called me Mr. Drummond in that put-on accent of his. He wanted a check. He wanted a bailout. He was going to get a reality check instead. I glanced at the box sitting in Chet's lap. That box was worth more than any amount of money. It was the truth. And the truth is the one thing that can't be bought or buried. Cassandra thought she was banning me from her wedding. She thought she was erasing me from the picture. She was about to learn that you can't erase the man who laid the road you've been driving on your whole life. We boarded the jet an hour later. As we climbed up through the sky and left Connecticut below, I gazed down at the sprawling highways, the veins of commerce I'd helped carve out of this country, and I ordered a whiskey. To family, Chet said, lifting his glass. To family, I said, and to taking out the trash. I drank. It burned going down. It was good. Paris was waiting. The Moreaus were waiting. They were probably laughing right now, drinking champagne they couldn't afford, toasting the stupid American truck driver who was bankrolling their whole operation. Let them laugh. Let them enjoy the champagne. It would be the last vintage they ever tasted because Walt Drummond was on his way, and I was bringing the receipts, every last one of them. We touched down at Le Bourget just as the sun was sinking behind Paris. The sky was gray and miserable, which suited my mood just fine. I watched the rain drag itself down the window of the Gulf Stream as we taxied toward the private hangar. Chet was already on his phone, firing instructions at his team back in New York, making sure every document would be in place for the ambush. I just watched the tarmac. This was the city of lights, the city of love, and I had come here to declare war on my own blood. We checked into the Crillon. I had no interest in the thread count of the sheets or the view of the Eiffel Tower. I cared about the secure Wi-Fi and the conference table in the suite. Chet set up his war room right away, spreading the dossier on the Moreau family across the table, like a general mapping out an invasion. I poured myself a drink. It was time to make the call. My hand felt heavy when I picked up the phone. This was the hardest part of all. I had to sell the lie. I had to make Cassandra believe I was the beaten dog rolling over to show its belly. I had to convince her that her insults had landed, that I was ashamed, that I was ready to fold. Every fiber in my body fought against it. I was a man who had stood his ground against union bosses and hostile takeovers. I didn't submit to anyone. But for this trap to spring shut, she had to believe she'd already won. I dialed her number. It rang 4 times. She was probably screening, expecting me to come crawling. "Hello?" Her voice was sharp, impatient. "Cassandra," I said. I kept my voice low. "Worn out? Dad," she sighed. "I told you I don't have time for this. We're at the venue. The florist is a nightmare. Unless you're calling to tell me the transfer went through, I'm hanging up. I'm in Paris," I said. The line went quiet, a long, cold silence. "What?" she hissed. "You're in Paris. I told you not to come. I told you flat out you are not welcome here. Lucas said this would be a disaster. Why can't you listen for once in your life? I'm not here for the wedding." I lied. I pushed the words out through clenched teeth. "I'm not going to the ceremony, Cassandra. I respect your wishes. I know I'd embarrass you. I know I don't belong in your world." "Then why are you here?" she demanded. "I'm here to sort out the money," I said. "I told you the bank flagged the transfer. I had to come in person to sign the release forms because of the size of the amount. And I brought the rest of it, the check for the catering, the check for the dress. All of it." I heard her breathing shift. The anger was still there, but now something else was mixed into it. Greed. The shark had picked up the scent. "You have the money?" she asked. "I have it," I said. "But I can't just hand it over. Cassandra, Chet is here with me." "Chet, why did you bring your lawyer?" "Because this is a significant amount of capital," I said. "I'm transferring a large portion of my liquid assets to you as a wedding gift. But to keep the French government from taking 40% of it, we need to structure it properly as a family trust." "A trust." She sounded wary. "It's for your protection," I said. "It locks the assets in your name. But there's a catch." "What catch?" "Luca and his parents need to sign a waiver." I told her it's a standard document. It simply confirms they acknowledge the funds are a gift from me to you. It shields the money from creditors. Just a formality. Chet says we can get it done in 20 minutes over dinner. I held my breath. This was the hook. If she bid on the money, she'd swallow the whole thing. "I don't know, Dad," she said. "Luca's parents are extremely busy. They have fittings. They have social commitments. They don't want to sit down to dinner with you." "Tell them I'm flying out tomorrow morning," I said. "Tell them I just want to execute the paperwork, hand over the checks, and get back on the plane. I won't even stay through dessert. I just want to make sure my little girl is looked after." I let my voice catch on that last line. It was a nice touch. She wavered. I could hear her voice go muffled as she spoke to someone on her end. Probably Luca. The sound of French low and murmuring. Then she was back on the line. "How much is in the trust?" she asked. $3 million, I said. I heard a sharp breath pulled in. That number was big enough to bury every doubt she had. It was big enough to make the fake aristocrats drool. "Okay," she said. Her voice went sweeter all of a sudden, artificially sweet. "Okay, Dad, we can do dinner, but it has to be tonight, and it has to be somewhere quiet. We don't want a scene." "I have a reservation at Le Varennes," I said. 8 o'clock. She sounded almost impressed. That's actually acceptable. Luca loves that restaurant. 3 Michelin stars." "I know," I said. Chet booked the private room. Just us. No audience, no embarrassments. "Fine," she said. "We'll be there. But Dad, please don't wear the leather jacket. Don't tell the story about the time you hauled manure to Kentucky. Just sign the papers and let us eat." "I promise," I said. "I'll be invisible. Just a signature on a check." "Good," she said. "See you at 8. She hung up. I set the phone down on the table. My hand was trembling, not from nerves, from adrenaline. The trap was set. They were coming. They were coming for the 3 million. They were coming to sign documents they believed would seal their fortune. They had no idea that the papers Chet was preparing weren't a trust at all. They were a confession. Chet glanced up from his laptop. The printer in the corner was running pages, churning out one after another. "They took the bait," he asked. "Hook, line, and sinker," I said. "They're coming to Le Varennes at 8. Chet let out a low whistle. "Le Varennes, you're really going all in. That bill alone will run 5 grand. It's the last supper of the condemned," I said. "They might as well eat well." I walked over to the printer. I lifted the fresh pages off the tray. It was the prenuptial agreement Chet had drawn up, but it was nothing like a standard prenup. It was a document laying out every single debt the Moreau family had accumulated, a document that transferred liability, a document that, read closely, would make plain that I knew absolutely everything. But they wouldn't read it closely. They'd be too busy staring at the fake check for $3 million I was going to lay on the table, too busy swirling the vintage wine, too blinded by their own greed to feel the steel jaws closing around their ankles. I went into the bathroom to shave. I studied my face in the mirror. I looked old, worn down. The past few days had taken something from me, but there was a fire burning behind my eyes. I hadn't seen there in a long time. The fire of the man who built something real from the seat of a truck. I shaved close. I trimmed my mustache. I walked back out and opened my suitcase. I didn't reach for the jeans. I didn't pull out the work boots. I took out the suit I'd bought in New York 5 years ago for an awards dinner I never ended up attending. A bespoke navy suit, British wool. It fit me like armor. I put on a crisp white shirt. I knotted a silk tie. I fastened the cufflinks Cassandra had given me for Christmas 10 years ago, back before she stopped buying me gifts. Chet let out a whistle when he saw me. "You clean up nice, Walt. You look like a senator or a hitman." "Tonight I'm both," I said. We left the hotel at 7:30. The rain had cleared, but the streets were still slick, the pavement throwing back the glow of the streetlights. Paris was beautiful. It was a shame I was about to blow a hole straight through it. We took the hotel car, a black Mercedes. I sat in the back and watched the city slide past the window, couples moving along the sidewalks hand in hand, families tucked into cafes. I found myself wondering where things had gone wrong with Cassandra, wondering if there was a moment I could have turned it around. Maybe if I'd been home more. Maybe if I hadn't handed her everything she asked for. But regret is dead weight. You can't back a truck up once you're moving on the highway. You just keep driving forward. We pulled up to the Place des Vosges. The restaurant was set apart, discreet, refined, the kind of place where money doesn't announce itself. It just hums. The maitre d' greeted us at the door. He knew who I was, not because I was famous, but because I had purchased the building 3 years ago through a shell company as a diversification asset. Chet had arranged it. I had never once eaten here myself. But tonight I was the landlord. "Mr. Drummond," the maitre d' said with a slight bow. "Your guests have already arrived. They're in the private salon. Are they drinking?" I asked. "They've ordered a bottle of Romanée Conti, 1989. Of course they have," I said. "That's a $20,000 bottle of wine. They were already spending my money before I'd handed over a dime." "Put it on my tab," I said. "Let them drink." Chet and I passed through the main dining room. Hushed, elegant, people murmuring in low voices over plates of food that looked more like sculpture than dinner. I felt large, out of place, but I also felt powerful. We reached the heavy oak doors of the private room. Laughter was bleeding through from the other side. Luca's laugh, loud, braying. I recognized the mockery in it. I stopped. I straightened my cuffs. I looked at Chet. He gave me a nod. He pressed his hand against the breast pocket of his jacket where the documents were resting. "Showtime, Walt," he murmured. I pushed the doors open. The laughter cut off. They were arranged around a circular table draped in white linen. Luca, Cassandra, and two people who could only be Armand and Isabelle Moreau. They matched their dossier photographs exactly. Armand had on a suit that had gone too tight, his face pink from the wine. Isabelle was layered in jewelry that I now knew was either paste or insured to the hilt. Cassandra looked stunning, I won't pretend otherwise. She had on a white dress, her hair swept up. She looked every bit the princess she'd always dreamed of becoming. But when her eyes landed on me, something shifted in her expression. She looked at the suit. She looked at Chet. Something didn't add up for her. "Dad," she said, you look different." I crossed to the empty chair at the head of the table. No smile, no embrace. "Good evening," I said, even, controlled. Luca half rose from his seat. He glanced at my suit, then over at his parents. He looked uncertain. "Mr. Drummond," he said, "we were just raising a glass to family." "Sit down, Luca," I said. He sat. I turned my gaze to Armand and Isabelle. They were watching me with that particular mixture of curiosity and contempt. They registered the suit, but underneath it they still saw the truck driver. They saw the mark. "Cassandra," I said, "make the introductions." She cleared her throat. "Mom, Dad. This is my father, Walt Drummond, and his associate. This is Chet Rafferty," I said, "my general counsel." Armand raised an eyebrow. "Counsel? Is that really necessary for a family dinner?" "It is when we're discussing a trust of this size," Chet said. He set his briefcase on the table. He snapped the latches open. The sound cracked through the quiet room. Isabelle smiled. A tight, predatory smile. "But, of course, we understand completely. Business is business. We are simply so grateful, Walt, that you have chosen to support the children. It is a very generous thing." Her English came with a heavy accent, practiced sounding. "It isn't generosity," I said. "It's an investment." I sat down. The waiter filled my glass with the $1,000 wine. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it sitting there. So I said, "Before we sign anything, before the check changes hands, I want to hear about the wedding. I want to hear about the family I'm bringing mine into. Tell me, Armand, tell me about the chateau." Armand swelled with pride. "Ah, the chateau. It is the crown jewel of the Moreau legacy. It has been in our family for 6 generations. The history is quite staggering." "I bet it is," I said. "And the vineyard producing the finest grapes in Bordeaux," he continued. "We sell exclusively to private collectors." I nodded. I turned to Luca. "And you, son, how is the consulting business?" Luca swirled his wine. "Booming," he said. "The markets are volatile. People need guidance. I have clients in Dubai and London. I am actually turning business away." Cassandra beamed across the table. She looked at me with an expression that said, "See, I told you." "Very impressive," I said. "It can be a burden at times." Isabelle sighed. "The weight of wealth, the upkeep of tradition. You Americans, you are fortunate. You have new money. It is so much less complicated. Old money, it is a heavy crown to wear." I glanced at Chet. He was working hard not to laugh. "Well, I said I would like to help take some of that weight off your shoulders. That is what we are here for." Chet drew the papers from his briefcase. He laid a thick stack on the table in front of me. Then he placed a single check on top of the pile. I watched their eyes go straight to that check. Armand leaned forward. Isabelle's tongue moved across her lips. $3 million, right there almost within reach. "But first," I said, pressing my hand down over the check, "the paperwork." Chet slid copies of the agreement around to everyone. "This is the trust document," I said. I lied smoothly. "It sets out the terms of the asset transfer and includes the waivers I mentioned earlier. Essentially, once this money moves, you are accepting it as the full and final contribution from the Drummond estate. No future claims, no debts passed on to Cassandra. It keeps her assets legally separate from yours." Luca flicked his hand in the air. "Standard stuff." "Where do we sign?" He picked up a pen and reached for the signature page without reading a single word. Armand put on his reading glasses. He studied the cover sheet. He frowned. "This seems very substantial for a simple waiver. It is thorough," Chet said. "We want to make certain everyone is protected, particularly with international tax considerations." "Just sign it, Papa." Cassandra said the food is coming. Dad has to leave early. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Isabelle gave Armand a nudge. "Sign it, darling. We trust Walt. He is family now." Armand hesitated. Then he shrugged. He flipped to the final page. I watched them. I watched the pen hang over the paper. I held my breath until the tip touched the signature line. "Actually," I said, Armand stopped. He looked up. There is one small detail I neglected to mention, I said. What detail? Luca asked. He was already perspiring. I picked up my wine glass. I took a sip. It was outstanding, layered, rich tasting of earth and something darker. I looked straight at Luca. I forgot to ask about the rent, I said. The rent, Cassandra asked. What rent? The rent on the chateau. I said, seeing as it belongs to the Dubai Hospitality Group. And the rent on the apartment in Marseille, seeing as the bank took the property back in 2018. The silence that dropped over that room was instant. It had weight to it. Luca's pen rolled out of his fingers and off the edge of the table. Armand pulled his glasses off. His hands were trembling. What on earth are you talking about? Cassandra let out a nervous laugh. Dad, you're confused. The chateau belongs to their family. Does it? I asked. I signaled Chet. He reached into the box we had carried over from the Crillon, and started pulling things out. The deed, the bankruptcy filings, the police reports. He dealt them across the table like a card dealer working a hand. One in front of Armand, one in front of Isabel, one in front of Luca. This is the commercial lease for the castle, Chet said. This is the foreclosure notice on the dry cleaning business. This is the judgment for the $180,000 Luca owes to certain parties in Nice. I watched their faces as it all landed. It was like watching a building come down floor by floor. The arrogance drained away. The air of nobility dissolved. What was left was raw, exposed fear. Cassandra picked up the document in front of Luca. She read it. The color left her face. She turned to him. What is this? She whispered. It is a lie, Luca shouted. He shoved back from his chair, knocking it over. This man is lying. He is trying to destroy us. He fabricated all of this. Did I? I asked. I pulled out my phone. I put a number on speaker. Who are you calling? Isabel shrieked. I am calling the concierge at the chateau, I said. Let us ask him directly who owns the property. Luca lunged across the table, reaching for the phone. Sit down, I roared. I brought my fist down on the table. The plates jumped. The wine glasses shook. That was the truck driver coming out. The man who could swap a blown tire in a blizzard. The man who had no fear of a small-time French con artist. Luca froze. He sank back into his seat. You are frauds, I said. My voice stayed low. You are broke. You are liars. And you tried to sell my daughter a fairy tale so you could clear your gambling debts. I looked at Cassandra. Silent tears were moving down her face. She was staring at the documents. She was staring at Luca. And for the first time in 6 months, she was truly looking at him. Dad, she whispered. Is any of this true? I looked at her. Every word of it, Cassandra, I said. Your prince is penniless and your castle is a rental. I picked up the check for $3 million. I held it up where all of them could see it clearly. And this, I said, this was the only thing standing between you and ruin. I tore the check in half. Then I tore it again. I let the pieces drift down onto the white tablecloth like confetti. The dinner has been served, I said. But I seemed to have lost my appetite. I stood up. Chet rose beside me. We are leaving, I said. Wait, Armand sputtered. Wait, Mr. Drummond. We can explain everything. It is a temporary liquidity problem. The assets are tied up in restructuring. We can work something out. There is nothing to work out, I said. You wanted a truck driver. You got one. And this truck just ran you flat over. I turned to go. Then I stopped. One more thing, the final nail going in. I turned back to face them. Oh, I said. And one more thing. I looked at Cassandra. The wedding is off, I said. I canceled the venue this morning. I canceled the caterer. I canceled the florist. You what? She gasped. I canceled it, I said. Since I was the one paying for it, I decided to redirect the funds. Redirect them where? Luca whispered. I donated the deposits, I said, to a trade school for mechanics in Bridgeport. They are going to have a very fine graduation party. I buttoned my jacket. Enjoy the wine, I said. It is the last thing I will ever buy for any of you. I walked out. Chet followed. We left them sitting among the wreckage of everything they had built. We left them with the documents spread across the table, the torn check, and the $20,000 bottle of wine that I imagined tasted like vinegar by then. We walked out into the Paris night. The rain was still coming down, but it didn't bother me. It felt clean, like something being washed off. I had dismantled my daughter's wedding. I had broken her heart, but I had pulled her back from the edge. And as I moved toward the car waiting at the curb, I understood that the hardest part was still ahead, because now I had to help put the pieces back together. I had sat at the head of that table in the private room at Le Varenne, feeling like a lion watching a pack of hyenas squabble over a kill. The room itself was an affront. Tapestries on the walls that were probably older than the country I came from. A chandelier overhead, dripping crystal, that fractured the light into 1,000 cold, glittering fragments. The air carried the smell of old wood beeswax and the kind of heavy perfume that tries to bury the scent of desperation. Armand and Isabelle Moreau had been seated to my left, Luca and Cassandra to my right. Chet was at my side, his briefcase planted between us and them like a fortification. The waiter, a man in a tuxedo who appeared to have been born with a sneer already in place, had presented the menus. Heavy things bound in leather, printed entirely in French. No prices listed anywhere. I opened mine without hesitation. I knew exactly what I was reading. I had spent 10 years managing logistics for a shipping firm in Marseille back in the 80s. I spoke French better than I spoke corporate English. I could tell a Bordeaux from a Burgundy with my eyes shut. I knew that the Homard Blue was Blue Lobster, and I knew it cost more than a week's wages for most of the drivers on my payroll. Before we go any further, I need you to understand what is really at stake here. Not just money, not just a wedding, something far more personal is about to come into the light. Here is my question for you. If you suspected the people sitting across from you were playing a role, would you stay quiet and watch it unfold, or would you walk away before they finish the performance? But I held the menu upside down for just a moment to see how they'd react. I caught Isabelle nudge Armand. A small, cruel smile crept across her lips. She leaned toward Cassandra and spoke in French. "He's holding it upside down," she said. Her voice was low and fast and laced with contempt. "Look at him. He looks like a bear trying to read a map." Cassandra giggled. It was an uncomfortable sound, but a giggle all the same. She didn't come to my defense. She didn't say a word to correct her. She just lifted her water glass and turned away. I flipped the menu right side up. I furrowed my brow. I jabbed at the page with a thick finger. "I can't make heads or tails of any of this," I said loudly. My voice filled the quiet room. I made certain I sounded as American as possible. "Do they have a burger on here? Maybe a steak?" "I like mine well done." Luca pressed his napkin to his mouth to hide his grin. Armand shook his head with exaggerated pity. "Mr. Drummond," Luca said, smoothing his tie, "allow me to order for you. This cuisine is quite sophisticated. It requires a refined palate. We would hate for you to choose something that doesn't agree with you." "Go ahead, son," I said. I settled back and let my chair creak. "Order me the most expensive thing on the menu. I'm the one footing the bill after all." Armand turned to Isabelle and dropped back into French. "He thinks money buys taste," Armand said. "Look at those hands. Scarred. He looks like a laborer who borrowed a suit. I cannot believe we are sharing a table with this peasant." Isabelle patted his hand. "Patience, my love," she replied in French. "Think of the wire transfer. Think of the check. Once the funds clear, we never have to lay eyes on this man again. We will seat him in a corner at the wedding and tell everyone he is a distant uncle who had a stroke." I gave them both a big, warm, oblivious smile. "What are you all chatting about?" I asked. "It sounds elegant. French is such a romantic language." "We were just saying what a generous man you are," Isabelle said in English, addressing me as Walt. Her accent was thick and sweet like fruit that had turned. "We were admiring your suit. Very distinguished." "Thank you," I said. I smoothed the lapel, picked it up on sale, 2 for 1. Chet nudged me under the table. He was having the time of his life. He knew perfectly well the suit was bespoke British wool, but he loved the performance. The waiter came back. Luca ordered for the table. He ordered the Blue Lobster. He ordered the truffles. He ordered caviar. He ordered a second bottle of the 20,000 wine. He ordered me the chicken. For the gentleman, Luca told the waiter in French, "Bring the chicken and make sure it's cooked all the way through. He has the digestion of a small child." The waiter nodded without so much as glancing at me. As the food arrived, the humiliations kept coming. It had become a sport. They would take a bite of caviar, close their eyes in theatrical pleasure, and then fire an insult in French directly at my face, counting on my ignorance to protect them. "This wine is completely wasted on him," Armand said in French, turning the glass slowly in the candlelight. "He would be perfectly content with a Budweiser. He probably thinks terroir is a breed of dog." Cassandra was drinking fast. She was on her 3rd glass. I kept watching her. I kept waiting for her to put a stop to it. I waited for my daughter, the girl I had raised, to be strong and decent, to press her palm flat on the table and say enough. I waited for her to say, "That is my father, and you will show him some respect." She never did. Belonging to them mattered more to her than belonging to me. Dad, she said, cutting into her lobster, please try not to slurp your soup. The Moreaus are very particular about table manners. I set my spoon down. I looked at her. I'm just enjoying the meal, honey, I said. Isabel leaned in. You must understand, Cassandra, she said in English. Your father comes from a different world, a world of practicality. Our world is one of refinement. It is nothing to be ashamed of. Then she switched to French and dropped her voice to a murmur. He eats like an animal at a trough. Look at him mopping the sauce with his bread. It is revolting. How did you come from his loins? You are so delicate. He is a brute. Cassandra laughed. She actually laughed. I know she answered in French. Her accent was rough, clumsy American French, but I understood every syllable. I try, but he's impossible. He's really just a wallet at this point. Once the trust is in place, we can create some distance. I don't want him around the baby when we have one. He'll teach it terrible habits. That was the dagger. That was the moment the last thread between us finally gave way. She called me a wallet. She said she'd keep my grandchild away from me. I tore off a piece of bread from the basket. I dragged it through the sauce on my plate and made a full production of it. I chewed with my mouth slightly open. I watched Armand recoil. This sauce is something else, I said. Tastes just like gravy. Armand looked as though he might actually be sick. I cannot bear this, he hissed to his wife in French. Get the contract signed. I want the check and I want to go home. I need to scrub the smell of him off my skin. Chet cleared his throat. He caught my eye. He tapped his watch. It was his signal we had what we needed. My phone was sitting in my breast pocket recording every word of their performance. But I wasn't finished. I wanted to see just how far they were willing to go. I raised my glass. A toast, I said. They all looked up. They lifted their glasses with visible reluctance. To family, I said, and to new beginnings. I know I'm not the most refined man in the room. I know I probably pick up the wrong fork. But I want you all to know how much it means to me that you've made me feel welcome. It means the world to a simple trucker to sit at a table like this one. Lucas smirked. He raised his glass. To family, Mr. Drummond, and to your generosity. He drank. Then in French he muttered into the rim of his glass. To the idiot who is paying for my freedom. I drank my water. I watched them swallow the expensive wine. I watched them work through the food I was paying for. I watched them preen and posture, utterly convinced they had outmaneuvered the dumb American. They had no idea that the dumb American had understood each and every word. They had no idea that every insult they lobbed was another nail they were hammering into their own coffins. I glanced at the check sitting near Chet's hand, the fake check. $3 million. Their eyes kept finding their way back to it. It was the only reason they were putting up with me, the carrot. I decided to let it dangle a little longer, so I said, tell me about the wedding plans. What's on the menu? Isabel sighed. Oh, Walt, it is exquisite. We begin with foie gras, followed by duck confit. It is a traditional menu from the Moreau region. From the region of your ancestors, I asked. Yes, she said. From the era when my great-grandfather served the king. In French, she whispered to Armand. My great-grandfather was a butcher in Lyon, but this fool will believe anything. I nodded. Well, a butcher who served the king. That's impressive. Cassandra kicked me under the table. Dad, stop. You're embarrassing me. I looked at her. Her face had gone red. She was mortified, ashamed of the man who had paid for her teeth, her wardrobe, her education. I'm just trying to make conversation, sweetheart, I said. Well, don't, she snapped. Just sign the papers and let's be done with it. The cruelty came easily to them, effortlessly. It was second nature by now. They had long since stopped seeing me as a person. I was a resource, an object. I finished my chicken. I blotted my mouth with the linen napkin. You know, I said I've been thinking since we're all family now, maybe I ought to pick up some French. It would be nice to follow along with what everyone's saying to each other. Armand choked on his wine. He went into a coughing fit, his face going purple. Isabel thumped him on the back, looking genuinely alarmed. Oh, no, Walt, she said quickly. English is the language of business, the language of the future. There is absolutely no need for you to struggle with French. It is a terribly difficult language for someone of your age to take on. In French, she added, he would sound like a cow attempting to sing opera. I smiled. You're probably right, I said. I should stay in my lane. Driving trucks and writing checks. Exactly, Lucas said. You have a rare gift for writing checks, Mr. Drummond. Stick to what you're good at. He slid the contract across the table and clicked open a fountain pen, a Montegrappa, the kind a man either steals or buys on somebody else's credit. Right there, he said, finger on the line. And there too, and then the night is ours. I studied the paper. I studied the pen. I studied the three faces staring back at me, hungry, coiled, contemptuous. I reached for the pen. The humiliation had run its course. The meal was behind us. The small talk was dead. It was time for what I'd actually come here to serve, and these three were about to taste every bite. That Montegrappa sat cold and substantial in my palm, heavy the way a gavel is heavy. Luca was at my shoulder, circling like something that smells a carcass. Spread open on the table was the contract, a fat sheaf of cream-colored pages dressed up with a silk ribbon, expensive-looking, authoritative-looking, like a document designed to quietly gut me. Right on that line, Mr. Drummond, Luca said, dragging a polished fingernail across the signature flag. He was in a hurry. He wanted my pen moving before my eyes did. I had other plans. From my breast pocket, I fished out a pair of reading glasses, gas station magnifiers, $5, the cheapest ones on the rack. I settled them onto my nose, one careful inch at a time. Isabel's eyes went to the ceiling. Armand's went to his watch. "Easy there, son," I said, keeping my voice low and easy. My father had one rule: never put your name on paper you haven't read, not for any reason, not for any timeline. Luca exhaled like a slow puncture. "Mr. Drummond, please." Boilerplate, every word of it. Nothing beyond what we already talked through. A trust arrangement for Cassandra's protection for the assets. Chet shifted forward, planting his elbows and cutting into the space between us. "My client likes to know what he's signing, Luca. $3 million on the table, that's a serious stretch of highway. Give the man room." I lowered my head and started in on page 1. And the further I read, the hotter something got behind my sternum. Not anger, yet something closer to radiator fluid, climbing toward the red line in July heat. Because this was no trust document. This was a heist dressed in legal clothing. Article 4, Section B, the trustee named as Luca Moreau, would carry sole discretionary authority over all fund disbursements for what the document called lifestyle maintenance. Lifestyle maintenance, a tailored phrase. What it actually meant was that Luca could drain my accounts on gambling women and cases of wine, and Cassandra wouldn't have standing to say a word about it. I raised my head. "Lifestyle maintenance," I said, tapping the line with one finger. "Sounds like a broad category. My trucks fall under that." "Oh, Armand made a sound in his throat. "Trucks! Trucks would not be covered. This addresses the necessities appropriate to their circumstances housing in the correct arrondissement travel clothing. Appearances require upkeep." He turned to Isabel and said something low in French, something about tires, something about a peasant. I put my head back down. I turned the page. The paper crackled against the silence like a small firecracker. Then Article 7 stopped me cold, wedged inside a block of text so dense it was practically designed to put you to sleep. It gave the trustee power of attorney over any future inheritances or liquidations tied to the beneficiary's family assets. I went still, read it a second time, slower. They weren't limiting their ambitions to $3 million. They had their sights on the whole operation. Whether they knew the scope of it or were simply fishing blind, hoping to net whatever I left behind when I finally went in the ground, the effect was identical. If I put my name on this page, Luca Moreau would own Cassandra's inheritance while I was still drawing breath. My fleet, my depot, my land, all of it his to sell at will. The pen creaked in my fist. "This section," I said, pressing my thumb against Article 7. "Future assets. Somebody explain that to me." Cassandra's palm hit the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. "Dad, stop. If you leave me the Connecticut house, or whatever, it just means Luca can handle the paperwork, so I don't have to. He's capable. You're manufacturing a crisis out of nothing. Capable." The man was 6 figures in debt to a casino and living inside a borrowed identity. I watched my daughter. Her cheeks were wine pink, her expression tight with irritation. Her eyes weren't on the contract. They were on her own face mirrored in the dark window, one hand smoothing her hair back into place. She hadn't read a sentence of this. She didn't want to. All she wanted was the payout and a cab back to her fairy tale. That much faith in him, sugar? I kept my voice soft. Faith enough to hand him everything, even what I bled for. She gave me the eyes. "Yes, Dad. He's my husband nearly in 2 days. You wouldn't understand how wealth actually functions. He does. He grows money. He'll take what you scrape together and build something worth having." Luca squared his shoulders, chest out. "Exactly right, Mr. Drummond. private equity, emerging markets. 5 years from now, your $3 million looks like 10 million. I directed my gaze back to the page to keep him from reading what was behind my eyes, because what was behind them was a man considering whether to reach across fine china and close both hands around his throat. $10 million. Sure. He'd reduce $3 million to ash in 3 weeks flat. Article 9 was next. In the event of marital dissolution, trust assets remain under trustee control as compensation for administrative services rendered. I swallowed the laugh before it got out. A prenuptial agreement flipped inside out if the marriage blew apart. He walked away holding every dollar, his exit bonus for robbing her. I cut a glance at Chet. He'd been over the draft. He gave me the smallest nod, 1 degree of movement no more. He saw it too. This document was the evidence. It named the intent. It confirmed the contempt. These people had taken one look at me and seen a vault with a broken lock. I flipped to the next page. "Oh, that is enough," Isabel snapped, and the composure she'd been wearing all evening finally broke apart. "Walt, this has become absurd. We have somewhere to be. There are people expecting us. You are crawling through this the way a child mouths through a primer. Sign it," she hissed, dropping into French. Another minute of this, and I lose my mind. He is dragging this out deliberately. He cannot follow the language, so he sits there pretending the words might rearrange themselves. Someone take his hand and move the pen. I looked up at her, pulled my glasses down my nose an inch. "Ma'am, I've always been a slow reader," I said. "Long words tend to throw me." Luca pushed back his chair and came around behind me. Both hands landed on my shoulders, a grip that pressed a little too hard to be friendly, dressed as comfort, built as a warning. "Mr. Drummond, we are family in this room. Every person at this table wants the same outcome. We want Cassandra to be happy. Don't you want that?" "Naturally," I said. "Then put the pen to the paper," he said. "Show her you're in her corner. Prove you're more than a man who drives freight. Show her you're a father who shows up. Prove you've earned your seat here." It wasn't sophisticated, but clumsy pressure still lands when it finds the bruise. He was leveraging my love for her against my good sense, selling me the idea that a good father shuts up, writes the check, and disappears. I looked at Cassandra. Her stare was iron. "Dad, if your name isn't on that line in the next 30 seconds, I walk out of here and that's the end of it. I mean every word. You are wrecking this. You're giving them exactly what they always said about you. You're proving you're small. Small. My company hauls 10,000 tons of freight every single day. 400 people draw a paycheck because of decisions I made. I've outlasted blizzards, hurricanes, and crashes that put other operators under. And there sat my daughter, wearing clothes I bought her, calling me small, because I wouldn't let a con man reach into my coat. The room had a pressure to it now, a physical thing. Armand was dragging a spoon back and forth against the table, a steady metallic pulse like the last seconds on a timer. Isabel's knuckles had gone white around her wine glass. Luca's breath was warm and shallow at the back of my neck. They were cornered. They were scared. That signature was the only thing standing between them and disaster. Without it, the Sharks and Nice would find Luca's address. Without it, the landlord of the fake chateau would change the locks. Without it, everything they'd constructed would come apart at the seams. I brought my eyes back to that signature line, leaned in, set the pen tip against the paper. A bead of ink spread into the fibers, leaving a small, dark stain. Luca's whole body softened. I could feel the relief move through his hands on my shoulders. Cassandra's face broke open into a smile, greedy and victorious. "Finally!" she breathed. I drew the letter W, first letter of my name. Then my hand went still. I raised the pen. "What are you doing?" Armand snapped. "Why did you stop?" I turned the pen over in my fingers, my brow creased. "This pen," I said. "It feels light. Is it solid gold or is it plated?" Luca stiffened. "It is solid gold, Mr. Drummond. A family heirloom, no less. Is it?" I turned the pen slowly between my fingers. I caught the faint scratch along the barrel. I saw the base metal showing through beneath the gold plating. A fake, just like every other thing in that room. Just like the chateau, just like the title, just like the devotion they claimed to feel for my daughter. I set the pen down. "I can't sign with this," I said. "It doesn't feel right." "Use your own pen," Cassandra snapped. She pushed to her feet. "Use a crayon for all I care. Just put your name on the paper, Dad. Stop putting us through this." I looked at her, really looked at her. The desperation was right there in her eyes, but It wasn't longing for my love. It wasn't longing for my presence. It was hunger for the lifestyle she had decided she deserved. She was prepared to throw me under the bus for a seat at a table built from sawdust and glue. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my own pen. A cheap blue ballpoint, the disposable kind that comes 30 to a box. I clicked it. The sound cracked through the silence. Click. I held it above the paper. Luca leaned in. "Do it," he murmured. "Change your life." I read the contract one final time. Every clause designed to strip away my dignity, my legacy, my self-respect. Every word reducing 40 years of blood and sweat to an administration fee for a French con man. I took a slow breath. "You're right, Luca," I said. "I should do what I do best." I pressed the pen to the page, but I didn't sign my name. Instead, I dragged a single thick diagonal line from the top left corner all the way to the bottom right. I bore down hard enough that the paper tore slightly. Then I drove a second line in the opposite direction, carving a giant X straight through the text. The ripping sound hit like a gunshot. Luca recoiled as though I'd scorched him. What is this?" he sputtered. I got to my feet. I shoved the chair back. I picked up the contract. "I'm editing," I said. I yanked the page free from the binder. I crushed it into a ball. Cassandra cried out, "Dad, what are you doing?" "That is a legal document." "No, sweetheart," I said. I dropped the crumpled ball onto the empty plate in front of me. "That is garbage." The room came apart. Armand was shouting in French. Isabelle was gasping, one hand clutching her pearls. Luca looked like the floor had dropped out from under him. But I wasn't finished. I looked at Chet. He passed me the other folder, the real one, the one carrying the truth. I cleared my throat. That single sound quieted the room. "You wanted me to sign a contract," I said. My voice was calm, cold hard as a winter road. "You wanted to take my assets. You wanted to manage my lifestyle." I threw the new folder onto the table. It skated across the linen and clipped Luca's wineglass, which rang out sharp and clear. "I think we ought to start with your lifestyle, Luca," I said. "Specifically the $180,000 you owe to the man in Nice. Or the matter of the chateau being a rental. Or the matter of your parents being bankrupt." I looked at Cassandra. She was frozen solid, mouth open, nothing coming out. "Happy wedding day, sweetheart," I said. "I brought you a present. It's called The Truth." The color in Luca's face drained to ash. He stared at the folder. He stared at me. And in that moment, the arrogance collapsed. The nobility dissolved. What was left was a rat with its leg caught in a trap. And I was the cat. And I was very hungry. Armand Moreau fixed his gaze on the folder lying on the table, like it was a live grenade with the pin pulled. His face was a mask of flushed indignation, the veins in his neck pressing hard against his tight collar. He glanced at Chet, then at me, and then he made the mistake of opening his mouth one final time in his native tongue. He turned to Isabelle and hissed in French, rapid and venomous. "This American pig is bluffing. He knows nothing. He is trying to frighten us because he is too cheap to pay. Don't look at the papers. Just call the police and have him thrown out. He is a peasant trying to sit on a throne." I let him finish. I watched his lips move. I watched the spittle fly from his mouth in his fury. I let the silence settle once he was done. Let it hang there for 5 seconds. 10 seconds. I lifted the glass of $20,000 wine and took a slow sip. Swirled it. Looked Armand dead in the eye. Then I spoke. "Monsieur Laurent," I said. My voice was soft, not the rough voice of a truck driver. It was smooth, precise. The French of a man who had hammered out shipping contracts in the boardrooms of Marseille for the better part of a decade. The French of a man who knew the language more deeply than the pretender sitting across from him. I continued in flawless French. "I assure you, I am not bluffing. And as for being a peasant, I've found that peasants are often the only people who truly understand the value of the ground beneath their feet. Whereas you, my friend, are standing on quicksand." The sound that tore out of Isabelle's throat wasn't human. A strangled gasp, a sharp pull of air like a seal breaking. Her hand flew to her chest and her elbow caught the wineglass beside her. The crystal-stemmed goblet filled to the brim with the Romanée Conti tipped over. Dark red spread across the white tablecloth, like a wound opening up, soaking into the linen, dripping down onto her Chanel lap. She didn't move. She made no attempt to stop it. She simply stared at me, her eyes enormous, terrifyingly white against her painted face. Armand's mouth fell open, but nothing came out. He looked like a fish dragged onto a dock, gaping, drowning in open air. The color abandoned his face so fast it was like someone had opened a drain. Red to sickly gray in a single heartbeat. Luca's fork slipped from his fingers. It struck the china plate with a harsh metallic clang that rang out in the dead stillness of the room. He looked at me with pure, uncut terror. He knew. In that fraction of a second, he understood that the game wasn't merely over. The game had been rigged against him from the instant I walked through the door. Cassandra was the last one to put it together. She looked at me. She looked at them. She blinked. "Dad," she whispered. Since when do you speak French?" "Since 1984, Cassandra," I said in English. I leaned forward, settling my elbows on the table right beside the spreading puddle of wine. "When I was building the European logistics network, when I was putting in 18-hour days in meetings with port authorities in Le Havre, you were an infant. You don't remember, but I speak it. I read it. I understand every word of it." I turned back to Armand. I switched back to French. "I understood when you called me a pig. I understood when you called my daughter a cow. I understood when you said you would park me in a corner at the wedding like a piece of broken furniture." Armand began to shake. His hands trembled so badly he had to grip the table edge to hold himself steady. "Monsieur Drummond," he stammered. His French had gone suddenly thin, halting. It was a misunderstanding. A joke. We have a very dry sense of humor in our family." "A joke," I repeated. I reached into the folder Chet had slid across the table. I drew out a single sheet of paper, bank letterhead. "Is this a joke, Armand?" I asked. I pushed it toward him. It slid straight through the wine puddle, picking up a red stain along its bottom edge. "It is a notice of default," I said. "From the bank in Lyon, the one holding the mortgage on the dry cleaning businesses you used to launder money for the local syndicate. It says you are 3 months behind on the settlement payments. It says that if the balance isn't cleared by the first of the month, you go to prison." Armand stared at the page. He didn't reach for it. He looked at it as though it might be radioactive. How did you get this?" he whispered. "I bought it," I said. He looked up at me. His eyes had gone glassy. You what?" "I bought the debt, Armand," I said. "I called the bank this morning. Chet handled the wire transfer. It cost me pennies on the dollar. Delighted to get rid of it, actually. The bank had written it off as a loss, but I assured them the borrower was someone I knew quite well." I settled back. The corners of my mouth pulled into something that wasn't really a smile, more like what a shark does before it circles. "You answer to me now, Armand. The debt is mine. The past is mine. Every door out of this mess runs through me. One call to the right people, and there will be uniforms waiting at Charles de Gaulle the moment you try to board that flight home. Fraud charges tend to ruin the appetite, especially before dessert arrives." Isabel broke. The sound she made was soft and wretched, a sob muffled behind both hands, her diamond rings clicking together as she pressed them to her face. "Please, Walt. We are family. Family." The word came out of me like a laugh, but there was no warmth in it. 15 minutes ago, I was a peasant. 15 minutes ago, I was an ATM with legs. The word family only showed up once I had my thumb on the scale. I shifted my attention to Luca, the prince, the consultant, the man who owed money to people who don't send polite reminders. He had folded himself smaller in the chair, shoulders hunched, jaw tight. Perspiration was tracking down his temples, catching the candlelight. He looked like a man bracing for impact. "And then there's you," I said. I drew a spreadsheet from the folder and laid it flat. $180,000 owed to a Mr. Volkov in Nice. Not a patient man, Mr. Volkov. I had a word with one of his people this afternoon. From Luca's throat came a sound I'd only heard once before, a dog that had just caught a kick it didn't see coming. "No," he breathed. You actually called them." "I did. Told them Luca Moreau was expecting a windfall. Told them he was about to marry into a wealthy American trucking family." Something sparked behind Luca's eyes, a desperate little flare of hope. "You put in a word for me," he said. "You vouched a ukibik wak endidaward. Son." I shook my head once. I told them the engagement is finished. I told them the trust fund never existed. I told them you have zero claim on a single dollar of mine. And I told them exactly where you were sitting tonight, at Le Varan in Paris, drinking a $20,000 bottle of wine while their money collected dust. The color left his face all at once like a candle being snuffed. His eyes jumped to the door. He half expected Mr. Volkov to materialize through it. "Why," the word barely made it out. "Why would you do that to me? They'll come for me. You reached into my company with both hands, I said. You sat across from me and lied without blinking. You sold my daughter a fiction, dressed yourself up as royalty when the truth is you're a card cheat with a habit he can't fund. I turned to look at Cassandra. She hadn't moved, pale and rigid, both hands flat in her lap, staring at Luca as though she were seeing him clearly for the very first time, the sweat on his upper lip, the terror in his eyes, all of it registering. Cassandra, my voice came out quiet. She turned toward me slowly. What I saw in her face wasn't anger. It wasn't grief. The arrogance had gone. The contempt was gone. Just shock, clean and hollow. One last thing, I said. I reached into my breast pocket and brought out a small black velvet box, the kind that suggests a ring. She frowned, uncertain. It isn't a ring, I said. You've got plenty of those. I opened it. A key sat inside. Plain silver, a Dior logo on the chain. You were humiliated over that dress, I said. The card declined. The staff made you feel like a shoplifter. You remember? She gave a slow, mechanical nod. I took care of it. I set the key on the table between us. I bought the store. Her jaw went slack. You could have heard a pin drop. Not just the dress, I said. The store. The franchise rights on Avenue Montaigne, that exact location. I rang the holding company this morning. They were in distress, looking to offload. I made an offer. I nudged the key across the linen toward her. I hold the deed to the building. I hold the inventory. And I hold the employment contracts of every woman who stood there and cut your card in two. She stared at the key. Her hand moved toward it, fingertips trembling. So I can have the dress? Her voice had shrunk to almost nothing. A child's voice. The kind that believes it can still earn an ice cream cone after burning the kitchen down. I pressed my palm over the key. No, I said. I held her gaze. I bought the store so I could dismiss them. And I bought the store so I could bar you from walking through the door. Well, bar me permanently. You're barred from that store, Cassandra. You're barred from invoking my name anywhere in this city. You're cut off from my accounts. You're cut off from my company. Every door I built closed. I pushed back from the table. The chair legs screamed against the floor. I wrote a check for $300,000 for a wedding that will not take place. I spent $50 acquiring your fiancé's debt so I could hold it like a leash around his neck. I spent $5 million on a retail address just to prove a point. I buttoned my jacket. I looked down at what was left of them, the collapsing family, the manufactured aristocrats, and the daughter who had decided the man who built everything wasn't worth her time. Armand had his face in his hands now, shoulders heaving. Isabel gazed into the wine-stained tablecloth like it held some answer. Lucas sat rigid, trembling. Chet rose, quietly snapped his briefcase shut, and gave me a single nod. "That's all of it, Walt," he said. I gave Cassandra one last look. "You wanted the fairy tale," I said. "Here's how this one ends. The carriage is a pumpkin again. The horses are mice. And the princess finds her own way home." I turned from them and moved toward the oak doors at the far end of the room. Her chair scraped. Her heels hit the floor fast. "Dad!" A scream raw and ragged. "Dad, don't!" I didn't break stride. I pushed through into the main dining room. Every head turned. They saw a man in a navy suit moving like he had somewhere to be. They saw a lawyer with a briefcase at his side. And behind both of us, a young woman in a white dress, mascara tracking down her cheeks, reaching. "Dad, please!" Her fingers caught my sleeve and held. "Everyone is watching. You can't just leave me here. They have nothing. Luca has nothing. How do I get home? How do I cover the hotel?" I stopped. I looked down at her hand on my arm, specifically at the engagement ring on her finger, which I was now fairly certain was either borrowed or unpaid for. I lifted her hand away carefully. "Work it out," I said. "I can't. I have nothing left." Her voice cracked. "You canceled the cards. You stopped the transfer. There's nothing." "You have your lineage," I said. "You have your noble connections. You have a very distinguished set of in-laws. Go ask them." They're broke," the word tore out of her. "You know exactly how broke they are. You just dismantled them in there." "I didn't dismantle anybody, Cassandra," I said. "All I did was flip the switch. They were already in the dark. They did that themselves. And you stood next to them and handed them the bulb. You were ashamed of me, ashamed of the work that put a roof over your head and a dress on your back every single day of your life." I stepped in close. "You told me oil and water don't mix. You were right about that. I'm the oil, I'm what makes the engine turn. You're the water. And right now, you've evaporated." I walked away, out through the restaurant entrance into the Paris night. The rain was long finished. The air was cool and clean, and above the rooftops a few stars had made an appearance. Behind me, I could hear her calling my name, and then the maitre d's measured voice asking her firmly to bring it down, and then the door swinging shut. The car was at the curb. Chet had the door open. I slid in, sank back against the seat, and let out a breath that felt like it had been lodged in my chest for a week. Done. It was done. Chet settled in beside me and tapped the partition. "Airport," he told the driver. The car eased into the street. I didn't glance back. I didn't check the restaurant window. I already knew the panic would be cresting in there. Right now, the blame flying across the ruined table, everything unraveling at once. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, looked at the number. It had taken a significant hit, more than yesterday, much more. But sitting there in the back of that car, I felt wealthier than I had in a long time. "Did I go too far?" I asked. Chet looked over. He worked the knot of his tie loose. "Hey, Walt, you purchased a Dior flagship just to lock her out of it. That's not revenge. That's scripture. That's straight out of the Old Testament." "She had to understand," I said. "And as she understands," Chet said. "Trust me on that. You didn't burn the bridge, you took out the entire river." I nodded, leaned my head back, closed my eyes. The tiredness was total, the kind that settles into the bones. But as the car threaded through the Paris streets toward the jet that would carry me back to my quiet house in Connecticut, something unexpected moved through me. Calm. A stillness I hadn't felt in longer than I could say. I had walked out of that room, having lost a daughter, but I had walked out with myself intact. And there are times when that trade is the only one worth making. Walt Drummond, truck driver, and I was going home. I stood beside the open door of the black Mercedes, the engine idling with a low rumble that sounded like a quiet threat in the empty Paris street. I had shaken Cassandra loose. I had turned my back, but rats don't give up on a sinking ship that easily. Not when there's still a plank left to grab. The restaurant doors crashed open behind me, and it wasn't just Cassandra this time. The whole pack came spilling out. Luca first lurching onto the sidewalk like a man who'd taken a body shot to the stomach. Armand and Isabel right behind him, their faces all panic and smeared mascara, a grotesque little procession of collapsed ambitions parading under the street lamps. "Mr. Drummond, wait!" Luca's voice cracked as he came toward me, arms out, desperation written across every line of him. "Please, we can work something out. The debt, the $180,000, a payment plan. I have things in motion. There's a deal closing in Zurich next week." I didn't get in the car. I stopped, leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms and took a good long look at him, at the sweat soaking into the collar of his expensive shirt, at the fear eating him alive from the inside. He wasn't grieving Cassandra. He wasn't thinking about his honor. He was thinking about his knees. Mr. Volkov in Nice was a man with a very short fuse and a very long memory. "A payment plan," I said. Yes, exactly." He halted a few feet away, breathing hard, not daring to step any closer. "Just a bridge, something to carry me until I get back on my feet." I made a short, sharp sound. Couldn't call it a laugh. "There is no wedding, Luca, and you won't be getting back on your feet. You'll be on all fours for quite some time. But since you've raised the subject of the debt, let's talk about collateral." "Collateral?" He blinked. "You owe me money," I said. "I hold the note. And right now, you look very much like a man about to run, so I'm calling it due immediately." I extended my hand palm up. The watch. Luca went still. His right hand moved automatically to cover his left wrist. The watch was a Patek Philippe, or at least it bore a convincing resemblance to one, probably the last asset he possessed that wasn't borrowed leased or taken from someone else. My watch," he stammered. "Hand it over." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It had an edge on it that the Paris night air carried just fine. "Consider it a down payment, unless you'd rather I ring Mr. Volkov right now and let him know you refused." He looked at me, then at the phone in my other hand. Something in him crumpled. Slowly, like it physically hurt him, he undid the clasp, pulled it from his wrist, laid it across my palm. His hand was shaking badly enough that he nearly fumbled it. I held it under the streetlight. Heavy, real gold. Probably purchased with someone else's deposit, another father, another promise, another lie. I put it in my pocket. "And the keys," I said. "The keys. It's the Porsche. The silver 911 you drove up to my house in Connecticut. The one leased through a shell company that I also happen to hold a lien on because I bought that note from the leasing agency this morning as well." He stared at me, jaw hanging. You bought the car note too. I bought everything, Luca, I said. I told you I understand logistics. I know how to encircle a target. Now hand over the keys. You're walking. He reached into his pocket. His knuckles were white around the fob when he brought it out, held it a beat too long. That key represented the whole charade, the speed, the image, the illusion of a man always moving too fast to be caught. He let it drop into my hand. I flipped it to Chet, who stood waiting by the trunk of the Mercedes. Have it collected, Chet. Sell it for parts. I turned back toward the car door. Now clear out. That was when it blew. Not a physical explosion. The implosion of a man who has lost every chip on the table and needs somewhere to put the blame. He couldn't put it on me. I was too solid, too prepared, too far ahead of him. So he wheeled on the only person within reach who had less power than he did. He turned on Cassandra. She was standing there on the pavement, arms wrapped around herself, white dress catching the wind tears coming quietly down her face. She was looking at him with something that was still somehow hope, waiting for him to reach for her, waiting for the words that would mean they'd face this together. Luca, she whispered, what do we do now? The face he turned on her was ugly in a way that had nothing to do with his features. A snarl, pure contempt. He said. He threw the word back at her like something rotten. There is no we, you stupid cow. Look at what's happened. Look at what your father did to me. She flinched as though he'd raised his hand. Shut your mouth. His voice bounced off the stone buildings and came back at us. You useless American trash. You told me he was slow. You told me he was a checkbook on legs. You said he'd sign whatever was put in front of him. You said he was starving for your approval. I didn't know, she sobbed. You didn't know anything. He advanced on her, and not gently. You floated around playing princess, spending money that wasn't yours, bragging about your father, the truck driver. I put up with you for one reason. I sat across from you at breakfast every morning, and I willed myself through it because I believed the payout was coming. That's all you ever were to me. Do you understand that? I stopped moving toward the car door. I watched. Every instinct I had as her father screamed at me to step back in there and end him on the spot. But something older and quieter held me back. She needed to hear this. Every syllable of it. This was the antidote, bitter, brutal, the only thing strong enough to burn through the fog she'd been living in. You can't treat a wound if the patient won't look at it. Cassandra stood there with her mouth open and the color gone out of her face. It was like watching someone realize the thing they'd been holding was never real, that they'd built a whole life around a prop. You don't love me, she whispered. Love you. He laughed, sharp, ugly, unraveling. I love Bordeaux at the right temperature. I love a car that corners properly. I love staying out of a prison cell. You were a means to an end, and the end didn't come. So now you're nothing, less than nothing. You're a liability. He spat on the pavement near her feet. That's when Armand shoved in, not to shield her, to go after his son. Idiot! Armand drove a hand into Luca's shoulder. You let this happen. You let an American walk in here and outmaneuver us. I told you to get the signature before the food arrived. I told you not to let him read it line by line. Don't put this on me. Luca shoved him right back. You were the one draining the wine and making speeches. You were insulting him to his face in French while he sat there listening to every word. You arrogant old fool, you handed him everything. Stop it, stop it! Isabel seized Armand's arm and pulled. Stop fighting. We have to think. We need money. Walt. She pivoted toward the car. She ran for it. Her palm struck the window glass once, twice. Walt, please. Every trace of composure had left her. The pearls, the posture, the bloodline all gone. Just a frightened woman in a wine-stained dress hammering on a car window. Don't leave us here. We have nowhere. The hotel will put us out tonight. We have no way home. I looked at her through the glass. I didn't lower the window. I just looked. Out on the pavement, Cassandra stood apart from all of it. Her fiancé and his father were pushing each other. Isabel was clawing at the car door. They were coming at each other in French and English, both a wall of noise made entirely of greed and blame. A pack of dogs over a bone that no longer existed. And Cassandra was silent. She turned and found my eyes through the tinted glass. I watched it land. I watched the exact moment the last of it gave way inside her. Not because I had cut her off, not because of the money or the dress or the canceled cards, but because she could finally see with nothing left, between her and it, exactly what she had spent years chasing and what she had traded me for. She could see the rot. She could see through to the hollow center of all of it. She looked at Luca, who was now hurling obscenities at his own mother. She looked down at the dress. She took one step toward the car. She found my eyes again, and she mouthed the word, "Dad." My hand went to the door handle. I held it there. I could open it, pull her in, drive her away from all of this, and let the cold night air slowly erase it. We could find our way back to something eventually. She'd be warm. She'd be safe. But she'd spend the rest of her days blaming me for tearing down her fairy tale, instead of blaming them for building it out of nothing. If I rescued her tonight, the lesson dissolved. She needed the pavement under her feet. She needed the cold in her lungs. She needed to find her own road back. I let go of the handle. I tapped the partition. Drive and I told him. The car moved away from the curb without a sound. I watched them in the rearview mirror. In the mirror, I caught Luca making a futile lunge after the car before giving up and putting his foot through a trash can. Isabel folding onto the sidewalk. Armand with both hands pressed against his head. And Cassandra standing alone beneath the street lamp, a white shape getting smaller and smaller as the distance opened up. She didn't chase the car this time. She just stood there and watched her safety net disappear. Chet looked over at me, said nothing. He reached into the armrest, poured 2 fingers from the crystal decanter, and held the glass out. I took it. My hand didn't shake. "That was hard, Walt," he said quietly. "Raising a child is hard." "Chet," I said. "Getting them through to the other side is harder." I looked down at the Patek Philippe in my palm. Heavy. Gold. Still ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Time had run out for the Moreaus. But for Cassandra, the clock was only now starting. No money, no roof, not a friend in all of Paris. She was about to find out what was actually inside her. Was she her father's daughter? Or had she just been along for the ride her whole life I drank? "We go back to Connecticut tonight," I said. "I've got trucks to run." Chet nodded. "And the girl?" he asked. I stared out at the smearing lights of Paris sliding past the window. "If she's a Drummond," I said, "she'll find a way. If she's not well, then she belongs out here with the rest of them." The car accelerated onto the highway, and the city of lies fell away behind us. I shut my eyes. I didn't sleep. I just listened to the engine and waited for the plane that would carry me back to a world where work meant something, and your word was your bond. I was finished with nobility. I was ready to get back to the dirt. I settled deeper into the back seat, and the leather shifted under me a sound of finality, a full stop at the end of a long and brutal sentence. Beside me, I heard Chet release a breath that he must have been carrying for the past hour. The air in the car was still, and clean lemon polish recirculated cool. Nothing like the smell of rain and ruin outside on the pavement. The driver slid the car into gear. His eyes found the mirror, looking for a signal. "Drive," I said. My voice came out rough. "Don't stop." The car peeled away from the curb, smooth and silent. I did not want to look back. Everything in me said, keep your eyes on the road ahead. Leave the wreckage where it lay, don't give it another second. But I'm a father. A father always looks. I turned my head. Cassandra was exactly where I had left her, rooted to the wet pavement, like something carved from ice and regret. Her white dress, the one she'd gone to war over the one that had cost her our relationship, was caked with mud along the hem. It glowed under the street lamps, ghostly and pale. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Even as a child, she had filled every room she entered, all noise and need and laughter. Now she looked like a paper doll someone had left out in the weather. Then she moved. The full weight of it landed on her all at once, that I was actually going, that none of this had been a performance, that the net was genuinely gone. Something in her snapped. "Dad!" It came out raw, primal. A sound that cut straight through the soundproofed glass like it wasn't there. She started running, in heels, stumbling across the cobblestones. Running in the $20,000 dress that was legally mine now. Running past Luca, who was still going at his parents. Past the maitre d', who watched with a look caught somewhere between sympathy and professional detachment. Running straight at the car. "Dad, please stop." Her arms were stretched forward, grasping at empty air, reaching for the bumper. Reaching for something solid to hold on to. "Dad, I have no money. I have nowhere to go. Please." The driver hesitated. The car eased off slightly. Natural reaction. You see a young woman in tears chasing you down a street, your foot lifts. I leaned forward. "Drive." The word came out low without warmth. "Don't ease up." He dipped his chin and pressed the pedal. The engine deepened, and the gap between the car and her widened. I watched through the tinted glass. She was pushing harder now, the desperation doing the work her legs couldn't. Her hair had come free from everything pinned into it and was lashing across her face in the wet air. Mascara had tracked dark lines down both cheeks. "I'm sorry," she screamed. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I love you. Please open the door." Something twitched in my hand. It would have been nothing, just a tap on the partition. Driver stops. Door opens. I pull her inside, wrap my jacket around her, get her to the hotel call room service, tell her it's all going to be fine. I had the money. I had the reach. There was almost nothing I couldn't fix if I chose to. But fixing it right now would break her permanently. If I opened that door, I'd be teaching her that betrayal carries no price. That she could look me in the eyeside with people who wanted to drain me dry, treat me like furniture, and I'd still hold the door. I'd be proving everything the Moreaus believed about Americans, that we're sentimental, that we're soft, that we'll fold when it comes down to it. Worse than all of that, I'd be taking away the only real chance she had to become someone worth knowing. She needed this bottom. She needed to stand on bare pavement with no carpet under it. She needed to know what cold felt like, what hunger felt like, what it meant to be genuinely alone with nothing between her and the world. Only then could she begin to understand what it had taken to build everything she'd walked away from. So I kept my hand where it was. I pressed my fist closed until I felt my nails against my palm. She gained on us briefly as we curved through a bend close enough that her fingers swept across the taillight and left a smear on the red casing. Then the road straightened and the Mercedes pulled ahead without effort. She lunged and went down. Her heel found a grate, or maybe she simply had nothing left. She hit the wet street hard, her dress spreading out around her like a collapsed parachute white against the black pavement. She didn't get up. She knelt there in the road in the rain, under the indifferent lights of Paris. Alone. Genuinely alone. Luca wasn't coming after her. He was back on the sidewalk working out how to make her responsible for his debts. His parents were useless even to themselves. Her friends were elsewhere. Her cards were cut. Her room was locked. She had nothing. She was wearing a dress she didn't own. She was in a city where she didn't truly speak the language. No cash, no ride. 28 years old, and for the very first time, she was standing in the total freefall. I watched until the car swung around another corner, and she vanished, a small white point absorbed into the gray city. I faced forward again, let out a breath that moved through my whole body. I felt like a man who had just amputated something necessary. "You all right?" Chet asked quietly. He was looking out his own window, giving me room. "No," I said. My voice was thick. "I'm not all right. That's my little girl, Chet." "She needed it," he said. "I know," I said. "I know she needed it. Doesn't mean it feels like anything other than hell." "That's exactly how it's supposed to feel," he said. "That's what tells you you're a good father. A bad one wouldn't care. A weak one would have stopped the car. You're doing the hard part, Walt. The part nobody sees." I dragged both hands down my face. The skin felt rough. "She has the return ticket," I said. "I didn't cancel her flight home. It's sitting in her email." Chet nodded slowly. "She'll sort it out. She's got her phone. She's got her feet. She'll get herself to the airport. Might take her a day. She might sleep in a lobby somewhere, maybe pawn those earrings you gave her, but she'll get there." "And if she doesn't?" I asked. The fear sat in my gut like something cold. "Then she isn't a Drummond," Chet said without wavering. "But she is Walt." I saw her eyes back there. Scared, yes, but angry underneath it. Anger is good. Anger is fuel. She'll use it. I hoped he was right. I prayed he was right. I pulled out my phone. Part of me wanted to check whether she'd called, whether a message had come through, but I already knew I couldn't respond. Not yet. Not tonight. Tonight she had to sit with the dark. I looked at the screen. Nothing. She was probably still on that wet pavement. I put the phone back in my pocket. I looked at the empty seat beside me. The seat she should have been in if things had gone differently, if she'd shown any gratitude, if she'd been kind. But she hadn't been. She'd been a snob who tried to erase me. I shut my eyes and listened to the tires rolling over the asphalt. I thought about every mile I'd driven to pay for that dress. Every lonely night, every motel room to pay for that ring. I'd paid my dues a long time ago. Now it was her turn to start paying hers. The car swung onto the highway toward the airport. The city lights began to fall away behind us. "Goodbye, Cassandra." I breathed into the air. "I hope you find yourself out there, because the girl who walked into that restaurant is gone, and the woman who walks out of this well. I hope I get to meet her one day. Just not today. Today I was nothing but a truck driver hauling a heavy load of grief back to Connecticut. And the road was long. Oh, morning mist sat low across the lake, wrapping around the reeds like thin smoke. Quiet, the kind you can't purchase. The kind that doesn't exist in Paris or New York. I sent the line out. The lure touched down with a soft plop, and rings spread across the surface. Chet was settled in the folding chair beside me. Beer in the cup holder, 10 in the morning, but he was mostly retired now. After Paris, he'd said he'd had enough excitement to hold him for a good while. Anything biting? Chet asked. Not yet, I said. They're considering it. Fish are patient. They don't lunge at the first bright thing that drifts past. They wait. They size it up. We let the quiet settle back in around us. A comfortable quiet. The silence of two men who have been through something together and don't need to narrate it. It's been 6 months, Walt, Chet said. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching the bobbers sit motionless on the gray water. You heard from her? I reeled in a little, just enough to put some tension in the line. Got an email yesterday, I said. And I haven't answered it yet, I said. Chet nodded. He took a pull from his beer. What did it say? It was brief, I said. No ask for money, no ask for a flight home, just happy birthday, Dad. And she attached a photo. A photo of what? Chet said. A pay stub, I said. Chet laughed, a low, quiet sound that sent a duck pushing off the bank. A pay stub, he said. From where? A diner in Queens, I said. The Rust Bucket, greasy spoon on Northern Boulevard. She's pulling double shifts, waitressing. Waitressing, Chet said. Cassandra Drummond, the girl who wouldn't put on anything without a label on it, is slinging hash in Queens. She is, I said, and apparently she's good at it. The manager told my private investigator she's the hardest worker on the floor. On time, every shift, no complaints. She picks up the extra shifts when the other girls call out. The investigator, Chet said. You're still having her watched. I'm a father, Chet, I said. I cut her off. I didn't stop caring. I just need to know she's safe, that she's eating. I'm not stepping in, I'm not helping, but I'm watching and she's living. Where? Chet asked. Studio apartment in Astoria, I said. 4th floor walk-up, no doorman, no view of anything except a brick wall and a fire escape. She's covering the rent herself, cash tips. Chet shook his head. That is one hell of a turnaround, Walt. 6 months ago, she was drinking 20,000 wine and calling you a peasant. Now she's pouring coffee for men who look exactly like you. That's the whole point, I said. She needed to meet the people she looked down on. She needed to serve them. She needed to understand that the man in work boots isn't dirty, he's tired. He is the backbone of everything. And she needed to learn that a dollar isn't just a piece of paper. It's a unit of life. It's time. It's sweat. I looked out across the lake. The sun was lifting the mist off the water, exposing the tree line on the far bank. The leaves were going orange and red. Autumn coming in quietly. She wrote something else in the email, I said. Yeah, Chet asked. She said she was sorry, I said. Not about the wedding, not about the money. She said she was sorry for being ashamed. She said she'd met a truck driver last week guy who comes in for breakfast every Tuesday. He reminded her of me. She said she actually talked to him, really talked. And she said she realized she'd been looking at the world through a dirty window her whole life. Chet smiled. Sounds like she's starting to grow up, Walt. She's getting there, I said. Still has road ahead of her. But she's behind the wheel now. That's all I ever wanted. What about the money? Chet asked. The $300,000, the wedding fund. I reeled the line in, checked the bait. It was still holding. I spent it, I said. Chet raised an eyebrow. On what? A new boat trip, somewhere. No, I said. I set up a scholarship fund. A scholarship, the Walt Drummond International Exchange Program, I said, for the children of long-haul truckers, specifically for kids who want to study foreign languages and culture. Chet started laughing, a real one this time, from the belly. He slapped his knee. You're telling me you created a fund for truckers' kids to learn French? I smiled. It was the first real smile in 6 months. Why not? I said. Why should the Moreaus of this world be the only ones who speak the language of diplomacy? Why should culture sit behind a velvet rope? I want the next generation of blue-collar kids to be able to walk into a place like Le Varan and read the menu right side up. I want them to look a snob straight in the eye and tell him exactly where to go in flawless Parisian French. That's beautiful, Walt, Chet said, wiping at his eyes. That is genuine poetic justice. It's an investment, I said. I'm investing in dignity. We went quiet again. Water lapped softly against the hull. Peaceful. The Moreaus, Chet said. Whatever became of the royalty. I sent the line out again, high arc long, cast landing in the deep water. Scattered to the wind, I said. Armand is in a minimum security prison in Lyon for tax fraud. Turns out I wasn't the only creditor he'd burned. Isabel is living with her sister in a small flat in Marseille. Word is, she's selling her fake jewelry online. And Luca? Luca's in the wind, I said. Last I heard he was washing dishes in a hostel in Belgium. Mr. Volkov in Nice has a long memory. Luca has to keep moving. He'll be running for the rest of his life. Chet nodded slowly. So you won. I looked at him. Did I? I asked. I looked down at my hands. Old hands, spotted, scarred. They'd gripped steering wheels and gear shifts and baby bottles and contracts. I didn't do this to win, Chet. You don't beat your children, you raise them. Sometimes raising them means lifting them up. Sometimes it means letting them hit the ground so they can figure out how to get back on their feet. I lost my daughter for a while, I went on. I lost the little girl who used to think I'd hung every star in the sky. But I think I might be getting a woman back, a real one who understands what a hard day's work is worth, one who knows that respect is something you earn, not something you're born into. I checked my phone. The email was still open. Happy birthday, Dad, I pressed reply. I typed 2 words. I'm proud. I didn't hit send. I'd wait. Let her work a few more shifts. Let her get through the winter on her own. Let her put a little more muscle on. But I'd send it, eventually. I put the phone away. Then the rod tip dipped. The line pulled taut. I got to my feet. I planted myself against the deck. I started reeling. The line went taut, heavy, alive, pulling back. Got one, Chet hollered. Yeah, I called back. I got one. I kept pulling. The fish wasn't giving up. It wanted the darkness. It wanted those cold, quiet depths. But I had time. I had strength. I worked at slow feeding line when it bolted, taking it back when it tired. Back and forth, a kind of wrestling match. And it struck me as familiar. Same as raising a kid. You grip hard. You ease up. You reel. You pray the line holds. And if you've got the patience, if you've got the luck, you bring them in. The fish broke the surface. A walleye, a big one. It twisted in the net, flashing gold and green under the open sun. Beautiful, Chet said. I stared at it. The thing was fighting with everything it had. It was strong. And that struggle, that's exactly what made it beautiful. I reached down into the net, worked the hook free, slow and careful. Then I lowered it back toward the water. Go on, I murmured. It hung there a moment still, like it couldn't quite believe it. Then its tail kicked once, and it drove itself back into the deep, back to the dark, back to its world, back to the life it knew. How come you let it go? Chet asked. Because, I said, drying my hands on my jeans, it's not ready for the table yet, still got some growing left to do. I settled back into my seat, reached for my coffee thermos, looked up at the sky, wide, blue, endless. I was Walt Drummond. I was a truck driver. I was a millionaire. I was a father. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was at peace. And that is where I will leave Walt Drummond's story, not at the dinner table in Paris, and not on that street where everything fell apart, but out on the water, with a thermos of coffee and a sky that had no ceiling. This one cost more than $300,000. It cost me the version of my daughter I had chosen to believe, in the one I had held on to, long past the point where the evidence told me to let go. What it gave back was harder to name, something like clarity. Something like the freedom that comes when you stop carrying what was never yours to fix. I believe God has a way of arranging moments like that, fishing morning, quiet, unhurried. No applause so that a man can finally hear himself think again. If you are walking through something similar, here is what I would tell you, one plain-spoken person to another. First, do not let love make you careless with your own discernment. Trust your instincts and then verify them quietly before you act. Second, the most powerful thing you can do at a table full of people who underestimate you is say absolutely nothing until the moment is exactly right. Third, when someone finally shows you who they are, believe them. Forgiving is not the same as forgetting, and mercy is not the same as going back. Fourth, use what hurt you to build something that helps someone else. That $300,000 became a scholarship. It became a future for kids who remind me of who I was. This is a family revenge story, But more than that, it is a story for anyone over 50, any adults, 50 plus, who has poured themselves into someone and been made to feel small for it. You are not small. You are the one still standing. If this story moved you, leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have not yet subscribed to Honor Revenge Stories, now is a good time. There are more stories, like this one, waiting for you. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, take care of yourself.